Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Sharon Bland, and I'm the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at Montgomery College. I'm pleased to welcome you all for what I'm certain will today be courageous conversations for many of us. The Fall Equity Dialogue stems from listening to the college community, in which we heard the need for more conversations about equity and inclusion. As such, we've launched the Dialogue series. The conversations are intended to create safe spaces for conversation and where rich dialogue can occur. Hence, we capped these sessions at about 100. We are pleased that we had great demand for this program today, and I want to thank you all for coming out. I'd like to start today's session by thanking the wonderful staff at Takoma Park Silver Spring and Dr. Brad Stewart, Vice President Provost. And I would like to thank our amazing co-chairs, Mr. Ramon de la Cruz and Mr. Jim Snezik, and the rest of the Fall Equity Dialogue Committee. At this time, I would like for our president, Dr. Darian Pollard, to come to the stage. Dr. Pollard will bring remarks and share her own reflections about the 2019 Equity Summit and this collective journey we are all on in the equity inclusion cycle of change, a draft of which you have in your packets today.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Long. I don't even see you, but I thought that was your voice I heard. Was it you for real? Oh, Dr. Stewart, thank you all. It is a pleasure to be here, and I always find this interesting. Those of you who've been in the classroom, I love how the space fills up from the back forward, and it holds the same when we have college events. They always fill up from the back forward. So I'm going to assume those of you who are on the back row were here first, and as a result of that, you are prepared to be deeply engaged in this work, all right? Can I get an amen? All right, very good. Let me start off. I have some prepared comments I'm going to offer here in a moment, but I really want to say thank you for choosing to be here. We are on a journey as an organization, and I think for a number of us, we would say at any different space that we are a gloriously diverse institution. We have worked hard to craft an environment that's welcoming for our students, for our employees, and for our community members, and I think each and every day we celebrate that beautiful part of what it means to be a part of a community like Montgomery College. But what I think is important is we start to do higher learning thinking, as we start to grow and we start to evolve, we recognize there are continued opportunities for growth and development. And the fact that you choose to be here, many of you are taking time away from other spaces where you have work left that you need to get back to. Many of you are coming in today. I met somebody who's not even supposed to be here today, but says she wanted to be a part of today's program. So let me first say thank you for choosing to show up. And in that, I also want to say I see you. Sharon and her team have worked hard to put this together, and they really do this in a way to have intimate dialogue, roughly 100 people together. And there are lots of folks who want to be in this space, and y'all chose to get here on time and be here. So as a result of that, I want to celebrate your commitment to this work. When I look at our Student Success Scorecard, it is obvious that our outcomes are not yet equitable. So this is why this work continues to be tremendously important. And we're still, as an organization, really unpacking the conditions that allow such outcomes to evolve. How and why do we continue to see outcomes for Black and brown students that are not equal to that of white and Asian students? How do we understand and interpret the fact that students who come to us oftentimes from the lowest economic strata are not as successful for those who come to us from economic strata that are very different than that? How do we as an organization grapple with the experiences of our employees that may or may not suggest that we are practicing the truth that we espouse about who we are as an organization? In our survey that we did just 2 years ago on equity and inclusion, we looked at this issue straight in the eye. And there were several of us who were like, do we have one more survey to do? Did y'all have survey fatigue? I don't know about y'all, but I had some serious survey fatigue, not because I had to complete 2 or 3 or 4 surveys, but because I spent time reading each and every comment that came out of those surveys. And there were a few days when I got to the bottom of the wine bottle before I got to the bottom of the surveys. But the important part about that, if you're going to address the issues that we need to address as an organization, you have to have the courage to stand in that space and to be prepared to hear what is being said. We saw in that survey that we had some trust lacking in important areas of the college. We saw that some members of our community didn't feel supported by the college, and we also saw that several felt limited by their career opportunities within Montgomery College. And I'd like to tell you that we listened to that, and we are trying to address and have taken some important steps to address these concerns. We've put together a new reporting line that if you have concerns about ethical issues within the organization, you can report that to a third-party facilitator who then works with us to get information to us. We have a whistleblower protection policy. I've devoted a number of college-wide addresses to this topic, including my town hall and then also the Equity Summit last spring. This has been the top of my agenda in speaking to a number of external audiences as well, including the County Council, which recently created a Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, and MCPS, which is also attuned to these issues. We talk about them. We're trying to grapple with them and figure out what they mean in our environment, and how do we as an organization hold ourselves accountable for the outcomes we want to see for our students and for the experiences we want both our students and employees to have while at Montgomery College. 2 years ago, I asked our Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, Sharon Bland, to form an Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee that has been reviewing the issues and advising me accordingly. So several small steps have been taken, and more are coming. But what we need is a combination of small steps and large cultural movements. Dare I say the C word, change. We need to look at equity in advertising, in hiring, and in training, and these are essential to ensure that there is true equity of opportunity at Montgomery College. But we also have to be courageous and bold and daring, and dare I even say vulnerable, to look at these issues as it relates to the root of the inequities. And when I talk about radical inclusion, this phrase that I started using several years ago, and I think about the word radical, it's not the way that it has been turned into contemporary society. Anybody know what radical means in the Latin? Somebody has to know. Root, it does, it means the root. So how do you get to the root? So radical inclusion is getting to the root of this idea of trying to have equitable environments where everyone has the ability to thrive and prosper within Montgomery College. Something that came to light in those surveys is that civility is an issue that needs work. I don't know about you all, but I've gotten to a point where I don't even read, you have an article and then you go to read the blog at the end where people can write comments. Anybody ever have that experience of you reading those and you start to say, one, did they read the article that was up there? That's the first thing you want to know. And then the second part is I thought, what type of person takes the time to think about things the way they think about them and then to express them the way that they choose to express them? And I see that we have growing areas within our contemporary society where we have seemingly given ourselves permission to be incivil. And then we call that sometimes being bold, being courageous, when actually what we're really being is unthoughtful. What we're being is uncivil, unkind to other people. And we know that treating people with respect is fundamental to any work within an organization, including work of equity and inclusion. It's not nuanced, it's not an esoteric idea about equality, it's just a basic element of being a good human. But apparently we've gotten away from that in some circles. We cannot accept this from ourselves, and neither can we accept this from our colleagues. We have to ensure that each person with whom we interact is being treated fairly and respectfully. Now, this sounds a little pedantic when I say it, but there are some outcomes to incivility. People who feel discouraged or disrespected will not advance because they are disempowered. They also won't bring their A game to work. Our mission is too critical to have anyone on our team who experiences this. That includes the eye rolls when certain people open their mouth in a meeting. It's the body language we have. It's the side commentary that we have when someone else opens their mouth. It's the meeting after the meeting in the hallway. Oh, some of y'all are looking like, uh-oh, she went there. Yeah. It's the text messages and then the side comments that go with it. That is what starts to corrode the ability to have authentic conversations and to treat each other fairly with respect. So let's build some personal awareness and professional responsibility around this. Finally, and I think because this is really why you're here today, is that recognizing that this is a learning process and we're all in a learning environment. None of us come to this work perfectly formed. None of us have all the answers, and every day it's about constantly thinking about how you can learn something different, something more, dare I say even something better than you knew the day before about someone else in our environment. Now, I've told the story over the years about how I've made cultural mistakes that needed to be cleaned up. Certainly not intended with malice, but out of a distraction or enthusiasm, more often than not out of ignorance. There have always been learning opportunities that we should take advantage of, and our notions of equity are evolving in real time, and our practices will do so as well. So let's have a little bit of patience with each other. Let's think about intent sometimes. I'm thoroughly convinced that oftentimes when we step into these conversations and we start to experience those moments where I call them those ouch moments, when someone says something and I kind of know I do this, ooh, because I know that that didn't feel good in that moment. I'm taking more of an effort in that moment to pause, to think about the intent of the person, and then to have private conversations with them afterward, not to show in that space necessarily. Sometimes you can show a little bit of an ouch, but the idea is to know that let's sit down and have a private conversation earlier, and let me explain to you how I felt and how I experienced what you did or said in that space. That takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of vulnerability, but it also takes the idea that you thought about what you want to say so that someone can hear it in the way in which you intended. I'll give you a recent example, and that's using pronouns that people prefer. A friend of mine, I'm in this season where while I have a 12-year-old, a whole lot of my friends from college have been taking their 18 and 19-year-olds, traditionally aged students, to college. So one of my girlfriends, you know, you're a college president, anything about college they call you up about. If it's the textbooks, if it's the lack of signage, if it's the lack of Wi-Fi, whatever it is, whatever they want to complain about, any college in America, I get a call about that. But my friend recently took her 18-year-old son to college and learned that new students introduce themselves with their name, their state, and the pronouns with which they prefer to be called. Now, my friend chuckled because she said, girl, let me tell you what they did, and I won't say what school. She said, after we did all the feel-good, touchy-good stuff, she said, then they had them introduce them, and she's my age, and she didn't grow up with this practice, and in fact, she felt very uncomfortable in that space. And what I realized, her humor and her kind of aghast reaction was really her discomfort because she didn't understand what was really working in that conversation. And she asked me later on in the conversation, what's up with this pronoun thing? And then we sat down and we talked about that in a way that was, one, a trusting relationship where she could explore the conversation, but more importantly, I was able to help her understand that some transgender folk feel misidentified by pronouns that people use without asking. And she got it right away. She understood at that point the idea of what naming means and understanding the fact of what someone is called can be very, very important to them. It's about respect. It's about making people feel comfortable so that they can excel, and every person deserves to feel valued. So language matters to many people within our society, and it's integral to their identity. And here's the other thing that I told her at the end of the conversation, it doesn't hurt you, Pat. And she kind of paused, she said, you're exactly right. So the idea of treating someone else with respect, with dignity, recognizing that their lived experience may be different than your own, recognizing that perhaps calling them by something that you didn't know but makes them feel more comfortable, it did nothing to rob me of my dignity. It didn't make me feel that there was anything less important about my lived experience, but by simply choosing to see them and to honor their lived experience, simply gave them an opportunity to thrive in that environment. Language changes, just like culture, require persistence, diligence, and yes, a bit of effort, but they matter. And I think that each and every one of us understands that because we've all felt disrespected at some point, and it drains you. It's exhausting when you feel that way. Each of us needs to bring to our work the best self that we have, and people and our students are depending on us to do that. So I'm really proud of you for choosing to be here today, and I'm very proud of this dialogue. I'm excited about the work that is happening, that will happen. I'm excited about the fact that we're going to walk out of here, and those of you who are equity and diversity and inclusion warriors will hopefully feel validated and affirmed and had your energy filled up. And those of you trying to figure out what all this means, you're going to feel the same way. And that some of us also are going to feel a little uncomfortable, a little vulnerable as we try to figure out, how do I make sense of all of this as I think about my perspectives within the organization? But I'm looking forward to the fact that I think we're going to be breaking new ground as an organization, both personally and professionally. We can all bring more of ourselves to our work, and that will affect and produce more equitable outcomes for our students, for our colleagues, and hopefully for the community of which we're a part of. This is necessary work. This is critical work. This is work that we must do together. My sister, who knows I love quotes, gave me a calendar, sits on my vanity in the bathroom, and every day I get a quote a day. And I don't know if it was prophetic, but a quote that I had, I think it was on the opening day of school this year. It said, "The greatest danger to our future is apathy." I'd like to think that we at Montgomery College are recognizing that apathy has no place within our organization. And this event and your presence here today speaks powerful messages about the fact that we are prepared for not just the present, but we're preparing ourselves for the future of Montgomery College and the students that we serve. Thank you all so much. I look forward to hearing great things. I look forward to hearing you all be courageous and vulnerable and celebrating and having a good time today. Thank you very much.
Wow, I learned something every time I listen to Dr. Pollard, and things to take back to incorporate into my continued learning and journey. So thank you, Dr. Pollard, for those words. In late 2017 and 2018, we conducted equity and inclusion, employee engagement, and ethics surveys. And in all the surveys, we learned that MC has clear strengths. We also learned that we're facing some challenges and barriers that we do need to overcome. While we are learning from our employees, we also learn from our students. I held Facebook Live sessions with student groups, met student senates on all campuses and the Student Council. Over 600 students attended our first Pizza for Your Thoughts series. And we launched this year's round of Pizza for Your Thoughts last Friday here at Takoma Park, where we received over 120 comments. So I was excited to hear about that. About a quarter of our students had high praise for MC across the board, and about half of those student comments were around food, the high cost, lack of variety, and desire for more healthy food options. Then there were social and extracurricular activities, including more activities and clubs for non-athletes, and more events like a homecoming dance. And then other things were high textbook cost. They wanted greater access to athletic facilities. And then there were some specific concerns about MC faculty and staff interactions, and some felt that there could be greater civility among peers and MC employees. Using the information we learned from the surveys and other data captured from listening tours, ombuds reports, focus group meetings, and the 2019 Equity Summit conversation, we've really started on our journey to transform MC to the next level of performance. 2019 and beyond will, and in fact must be, a time for action. The student voices from the survey was an important opportunity for students to provide input on their complete experience at MC. It amplified and focused our attention on important areas for students. Through the work of our SVP for Administrative and Fiscal Services, Ms. Donna Shenna, we have a new dining manager, and input from the survey has guided improvements in service. One example was last week at Pizza for Your Thoughts. We enjoyed quite a variety of pizza, including cauliflower gluten-free crust and vegan cheese pizza, along with traditional thick crust pepperoni. So we're in the process of developing an RFP for food and dining services now, and our current contract ends in June. So we're seeing a reimagined food and dining services program for our students and employees, and input from student employees and employees is really essential to guiding our redesign of our food program. And through our SVP for Student Affairs, Dr. Monica Brown, we hired a new college-wide director of student life, who I know is looking at innovative ways to meet student needs by helping create common student experiences. We've learned that we need to strengthen parts of our culture, processes, policies, and leadership effectiveness at all levels of our organization. Some employees told us that they are working at an outstanding college and that they love their jobs and work environment. And many others describe various barriers that frustrate them and their efforts to perform their jobs effectively. For some employees, it depends on who they report to. We have managers all along the spectrum of effectiveness and of various backgrounds and abilities, but there are things that we can all learn to help us become even more effective. For some employees, it's cumbersome and ineffective processes, inequitable access to technology, and inequitable application of policies that get in the way. Other employees said that they fear their manager and possible retaliation for speaking out and for recommending improvements in business processes. Going forward, that behavior on the part of managers will not be acceptable. There are actions we are taking that will help towards reducing and mitigating identified problems and opportunities. However, the transformation will require changes, hard work, and the hands-on involvement of everyone at MC. Working together, we can and we will enhance equity and inclusion for all employees and students. Let me share a few things that we are doing. So we are materially strengthening MC's recruiting and hiring, performance measurement, management, and employee training and development through the work of Dr. Mike Mills and his team in Elite, and Ms. Krista Walker and her team in HR STEM. And you will see recommendations and strategies outlined in the Equity Inclusion Roadmap for success from Pacey in this area as well. We're improving the culture and responsiveness to students' needs and overall outcomes for students through the combined efforts of Drs. Brown and Rye. We're also increasing leadership effectiveness of the organization through leadership and management level coaching at all levels, and revamping our work in organizational development. We're further enhancing MC's reputation with students and their families, Montgomery County and the surrounding community, and the college's stature among other colleges through the work of Mr. Ray Gilmore, Mr. Dave Sears, and IT, through the rollout of our new website and branding protocols. We're establishing a culture of accountability for non-compliant behavior, starting with the ethics training all of you went through for every employee in the college last year, and implementing consequences for those violating ethics codes and MC policies. We're laser focused on supporting people stewardship initiatives. We're providing more opportunities for reflection and dialogue around civility, like the 2019 inaugural Equity Summit, and then the follow-on fall and spring dialogue sessions. And that will also lead to the 2020 Equity Summit, which will be April 1st. We're also convening an MCTV program involving student panels, observations, and thoughts around equity inclusion. We're creating safe spaces for continued dialogue, which you will see more of in the roadmap. And leadership has heard you, believed your experiences, and has been working diligently and deliberately to create the type of work environment we all want, one that is equitable, fair, accountable, competent, collegial, civil, ethical, committed, inclusive, mindful, caring, just. I'd like to invite Mr. Tim Kane to come to the stage now. We're going to have a discussion about microaggressions, and also help guide us in our discussion unpacking the equity and inclusion surveys. And we'll then be joined by students for lunch and table discussions around racial equity and social justice, after which we'll report out our discussions and adjourn. Mr. Kane?
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and happy High Holy Days for those of us who are celebrating those. I'd like to thank Dr. Pollard. What an amazing and inspirational leader she is. I'd like to thank Dr. Stewart, Ms. Sharon Bland, Mr. Jason Bruffrey. What an incredible venue this is, and his team is incredible, and they've really taken good care of me and everyone here. And thank you to the committee that's organized this program. This is a critical conversation that we'll be having today, and it's going to be focused on the idea of microaggressions, which is not sort of an easy thing to talk about. It's not maybe a pleasant thing to talk about, but it's an important thing to talk about. Again, my name is Timothy. I use the pronouns he, him, and his, and I work at the George Washington University in our Multicultural Student Services Center. That situation, in terms of me being a non-Montgomery College person, I bring a sense of humility to share this experience with you. This is a time of vulnerability to look at what needs to be improved, and so thank you for having me here. Also, I wanted to share my sense of humility around the fact that, honestly, as a white man, I probably experience the least amount of microaggressions compared to other people in this room, and I want to acknowledge that. Much of this research that I'll be presenting today is based on work done by Dr. Banks, and I wanted to recognize her. I gave her a call and I said, I looked through your research and I really appreciated what you did. Would you mind if I shared it with other folks and adapted it? And she was very wonderful about that. So again, I've been here before, and I'm really impressed with your community. I think of you as an empowered community, and hopefully through this discussion, you'll feel even more empowered. Microaggressions are real. Microaggressions are a big deal. And the tricky thing about having this kind of a conversation, and I'm so sorry that we don't have more time for it to be more interactive, but hopefully it could be as interactive as possible. The tricky thing is bringing up specific examples might feel like we're rubbing salt in wounds that you experience every day. They might not be life-threatening wounds, but they're wounds nonetheless. And so I just wanted to mention that probably you might be reacting to some examples. I'm sure that you can relate to some examples, and my intention is not to sort of re-traumatize anyone in the room. And I know that the experience of a microaggression on any level needs a sense of healing, and so I really admire and espouse the idea that we have to take care of ourselves, and those of us in the room who've experienced microaggressions more than others really do need to be aware of self-care. So what are we going to do today? I thought we'd go over some guidelines, inspirations, and goals for our time together. And again, this is meant to be interactive as much as we can, and we have limited time, but please feel free to jump in, ask questions. We do have some microphones available for you to sort of give your comments. We want to talk about what is microaggression, effects of microaggression, because they are real, and the research suggests that it really does impact how we perform in any group or in our workplace. And as Dr. Pollard really makes very clear, she wants you all to bring all of you, because we need all of your wonderful input and contributions to Montgomery College. And microaggressions prevent you from wanting to bring all of you to work each day. How to address and prevent microaggression, giving voice to our values, our responses when we experience a microaggression, and then finally, a final reflection. I like showing this slide saying, this is our flight plan for today. We can adjust it, but hopefully this flight plan will get us where you want to be around, again, not fully addressing the topic because it's a complex one, but looking at it and sort of starting and continuing the conversation that's really important for your community. I love this image. It's the first all African-American woman flight crew. Pilot, co-pilot, and the crew were all African-American women. Actually, it was Air Canada, and it happened in 2009, which is kind of a wonderful thing. So if you have any specific guidelines that you would like to have this conversation be framed by, please let me know. Does anyone have any specific ideas that would help make this conversation productive and valuable and safe? Is there any? 'Cause this is kind of a tough topic. Does anyone have any guidelines that you think would be helpful? I have some, but I'm wondering if folks have some guidelines that you might want to throw out there. Was there a hand in the back? Anybody have any ideas? Well, again, this is meant to be as interactive as possible. So please jump in when you feel like you have something that you'd like to share. And again, just the framework of respect. The framework of respect in terms of sharing our opinions and our experiences is definitely a helpful guideline. I like the idea of sort of stretching our core beliefs. You know, for me, trying to understand the experiences of others has challenged some things that I grew up with. I universalize my experience, and actually that's an experience of privilege in this country. And I'm just, I'm wondering, doesn't everyone experience what I experience? Can't everyone hail a taxi and have someone stop and pick them up as they stop and pick me up? So let's stretch our core beliefs to try to sort of wrap our mind around an experience that might not exactly be our own. But please sincerely share or think about your experiences. And this is a time for listening. I'm kind of a cat person, but I love this dog picture. And I hope, is there any other guidelines that you'd like to offer besides what I just went over? Is that okay? Yeah? Yeah. No judgment. And the thing is, it's tricky because I always judge, and the trick is try to delay for 1 second the judgment that we jump to because it's sort of a natural human thing that we do. And then sort of say that might be our first thought, but let's sort of relax a little bit and go to our second thought. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else? Okay, awesome. The goals for today are, they're broad, they're big, but I want to make it more specific. I want to, first and foremost, have this be a safe space. Microaggression, here's my cat picture. Microaggressions, again, it's an uncomfortable topic. Could be a very painful topic, and I hope hopefully this will be a safe space for all of us here. The next slide. And I think if we can get around the idea of it's an either-or situation in our work and say that, we have to think beyond a binary approach to all of this. It's easy to say things are black and white. Almost never are they. There's always something going on. We don't know other people's intent by a comment they said. As Dr. Pollard said, she has and I have, maybe you have, made remarks out of ignorance that you didn't realize was offending someone or hurting someone. So let's acknowledge the complexity of who we are in the workplace that you work in. But I do want to give you some nuts and bolts ideas about how to move forward, how to navigate your own microaggression, because I have it, you have it, and then when we experience microaggression from other people. We could ignore the problems. We can just say, nothing's going on at Montgomery College, we're wonderful. Actually, I think the survey results, again, this is a vulnerable time in the sense of saying that there are things that need to be improved. And so congratulations to all of you, because I think you are stronger than you think. I think Montgomery College as a community is stronger than the microaggressions that we'll be talking about today. So why talk about this difficult thing? Why talk about microaggressions to begin with? Does anyone want to be brave and maybe shout out a reason why you think this topic might be a helpful one in your journey toward equity? Anyone? Sorry? Increase in awareness, all right. Awareness about what? Absolutely. Unintentional consequences of the things we say. We might not mean to offend. I would think most of us would never, on purpose or with intention, offend other people, and yet we do. It happens. Awesome. Why else? Please. Mindfulness. What's the difference, do you think, around mindfulness and awareness?
Maybe, oh gosh, okay. Wow.
Thanks for being brave.
What else do I want to say while I have the mic? I think awareness right now is having people in a space that are willing to improve our knowledge and understanding of something that may be happening that we all at some point or another have contributed to or doing without realizing. I think the mindfulness piece is the operationalization of being in the moment when you're engaged with someone and having the ability to perhaps in the moment practice reflexivity to understand that perhaps I might have just said something that could have had an unintended consequence, and let me in this moment, or as soon as you've had more time, address it and revisit it with the individual that you might have had the misstep with.
Can you come up here and like co-present with me? That was remarkable. Sorry, what's your name and your pronouns?
Jabet Lizapone,
Hi, where do you work? What part of the?
Academic Affairs Director of the Achieving the Promise Academy.
Awesome. I want to join that academy. That sounds great.
We'd love to have you.
Well, thank you. So the awareness is like the knowledge points. The mindfulness is the application. It's a sense of cultural intelligence. You're realizing what's going on. You're reading cues from reactions from your words and your actions, or the environments we create through the imagery we have on the walls, through other things that send messages to people about who's welcome and maybe who's been left out or forgotten. Anything else about the why? Please.
We're all perpetrators of microaggressions. We all are receivers of microaggressions. As receivers, we've always been told, kind of, it's okay, they didn't really mean it, you don't make a fuss about it. You have learned to kind of sweep it under the carpet. As perpetrators, we have been always said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, but I didn't really mean it that way, which is not a sorry at all when you have the butt with it. But, and to be able to come face to face with, it is okay to acknowledge that you are offended by something. That doesn't make you somehow a weak person who cannot stand up to. That, in fact, coming out and saying that you are offended is a great point of strength and vulnerability at the same time.
Yes.
Just kind of being conscious in the moment as we engage in these dialogues, that we have that very dynamic potential going on.
Excellent. Sorry, what's your name and where do you work? What department? Sorry.
I'm Usha Venkatesh. I'm an interim dean for communication studies, English as a second language, and linguistics.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that sharing. So it's ironic, the idea that those who experience the microaggression or who are the target or victim of the microaggression seem to have maybe an extra burden to explain why it was offensive when they're also being vulnerable around the unfolding situation. Was there another comment over here?
As part of the reason why is one, with microaggressions, I'm assuming we're trying to eliminate them, remove them. That only seems like be 50% of what we need to do, is that there's microaffirmations. There's micro-messaging, so a start point of the negativeness or the deficit piece might mislead us into, oh, we're just going to stop something. But when you stop something, you often want to replace it with something. So the understanding the power of micro-messaging, which micro-affirmations can help with, is to replace it with that active, dynamic culture where not only are we trying to stop and reduce the harm, but we understand the power of micro-messaging in a positive sense as well, and how do we start activating that more?
Yes, thank you very much. And actually,
We have another one.
oh, another comment? Sorry.
Yes.
Please.
Oh, I don't know if this is the kind of comment that you want.
Please.
So I'm relatively new to the college,
Welcome.
and one of my concerns is that we're not going to touch on safety. I think that microaggression is the germination of issues that can harbor and fester. And because there's a huge student population here, many of whom are individuals who are coming from, as the president mentioned, 160 different countries around the world, you don't know whether or not any one of those individuals who are coming onto campus seeking an education may also have issues that they have harbored before they even got here. And so how we treat each other as faculty and staff is one issue. And then how we interact with the students and how they are empowered to act with us can combine to become a safety issue if it's not tackled appropriately. And because I work in a building where there are many students who come in and out, believe it or not, it's a very fearful thing for me. I'm not accustomed to it. And so because of that, I wanted to express the fact that if you've been here for 35 years or not, being accustomed to how to deal with that many people that you don't know is a very interesting environment.
Yep. You have to be nimble, you have to adjust, you have to use your cultural intelligence. Sorry, what's your name and where do you work?
I can't stay anonymous.
Well, if you want to.
My name's Fizi Halim, and I work in workforce development.
Awesome. And sorry, I didn't, what's your name and where do you work?
It's Rich Takoma, and I work I'm the director of the ISTEM network.
Great, thanks. The research suggests and the practice suggests that we need to look at all these pieces. We need to look at the microaggression and the microaffirmations, but when we jump too quickly to the microaffirmations, we seem to dismiss, to a certain extent, the reality of the microaggressions that we do need to look at and that are hurtful. So all of these pieces, if I want to work for gender equity, I need to look at my male privilege. I need to look at all the things that get in the way of having gender equity. And so this is the same thing here with your journey toward equity in terms of diversity and inclusion. All right, so you have your code of ethics, which is pretty remarkable. And I love the fact that it's clear. You've been trying to communicate it to everybody. Because sometimes it's not so easy to sort of pin down an institution around what you believe in terms of values. And so you say, okay, we have these wonderful values, and yeah, it's like this beautiful pathway, and then the end is like equity. It's like, wow. And actually, I think it's a little bit more like this, And I'm really scared of heights. I'm almost like, ugh. I think it's a little bit more like that. And so you can sort of say, yeah, it's like this easy thing. As Dr. Pollard said, it's a time of being vulnerable, and I don't want to be vulnerable. It's a time for looking at how things have not worked out well, how things, experiences of employees first impact the community in terms of your service with students. And so it's not an easy job. It's not an easy journey, and yet we're making it. So what we want to do now is we want to show a video. Jonathan Haidt he calls himself a moral psychologist, and he has a video that describes a bit about how our brains work and how we can change our behavior. And I want to relate that video and the learning from it to the idea of microaggressions, because he talks about two systems in our brain. So our wonderful tech folks, we're going to cue a video.
Psychologists know that there are two systems in our brains, the rational system and the emotional system. Jonathan Haidt, who's a psychologist at NYU, came up with a great analogy for these two systems. He said, think of your brain as a human rider atop an elephant. The rider represents the rational system. That's the part of us that plans and problem solves. The rider might do some analyzing and decide, hey, I want to go that way. But it's the elephant, representing the emotional system, that provides the power for the journey. The rider can try to lead, the elephant or drag the elephant, but if these two ever disagree, who would you bet on? The elephant has a 6-ton weight advantage, and it's exactly that power imbalance that makes adopting new behaviors very hard. If you want this duo to head a new direction, you also need to think about the path, which represents the external environment. This duo is more likely to complete a journey if you can shorten the distance and remove any obstacles in their way. So bottom line, if you want to lead change, you've got to do 3 things. Give direction to the rider, knowledge of how to get to the destination. You've got to motivate the elephant, which means tapping into emotion. And finally, you need to shape the path to allow for easy progress. That's how change happens.
Any general first reactions to, it was kind of a quick video, talking about change, making change happen, first on a behavioral, personal level, and then all of that combining for institutional change. So any reactions to the video? Does it sound familiar? Yeah.
I have a reaction. It may be a little bit negative, though.
Sure.
My initial thought was, the elephant has to have a heart.
Ah.
It has to have that emotional desire to even be change or that boldness or just the heart in general.
Yeah. So you're saying some of us, hopefully not that many of us, might not have the motivation and the inclination and the values that you looked at before and personal and professional values to make change. Yeah. And that's why they say you have to motivate the elephant. So even if, there's sort of, in one sense, a carrot and a stick idea where we can motivate folks to act in the right way. And then we have policies, we have follow-up, we have accountability. That's more the carrot, more the stick. But thank you for sharing that. You're right. Any other thoughts? And we'll start jumping right into this. Okay, so Jonathan's talking about 2 systems in our brain. He's saying that we have the rational system and we have the emotional system. And this definitely relates to unconscious bias, which was one of the workshops I led here previously. And the idea of traveling any pathway, so our pathway or your pathway around equity at Montgomery College and equity within your experience at Montgomery College is also, how do we change what's going on here? They're saying that we make access to equity in terms of a pathway, we try to make it shorter, we shorten the distance to equity, which is a little tricky, or we eliminate obstacles. And so microaggressions are definitely, or microaggression is definitely an obstacle on your pathway toward equity. And so what Jonathan is saying is that there are 3 strategies to help get to the end result or the goal of your path. You can give direction and knowledge to the rider. This is my Googling getting from my house to here. So you can give direction and knowledge to the rider. You can motivate the elephant, which is exactly what you just mentioned. And we can shape the path. It's like, ooh, that might be a realistic path to the endpoint of equity because it's an ongoing journey. We're going to look today at eliminating obstacles in terms of microaggressions, or trying to mitigate, trying to decrease them in terms of your experience here with each other, with your colleagues, with your supervisor. And I appreciate the comment in the back about the student experience. We're looking now at your experience. And the student experience absolutely is important, and we need to make sure that you're in a good place to serve the students well. So Jonathan is saying we need to give direction and we need to give knowledge to get rid of obstacles in our pathway to change our behavior. And so that's what we'll be looking at today in terms of microaggressions. So microaggressions, how would someone describe a microaggression? Could someone just sort of popcorn ideas out there? And again, I don't mean to re-traumatize anyone, but if you had to describe to someone from another planet what a microaggression was, how would you maybe start describing it? Anybody have an idea? Yeah. Exclusion. Okay.
It could be from exclusion from attending a meeting.
right?
Yes.
All the way down to the group of people going out for lunch and not including the person who you walked right past.
Exactly. Yep. And if you don't feel included, I don't feel welcomed, and I'm just like, forget this. I am so checked out of this situation right now. Exclusion. Anything else? Yeah. Yes. Right. Exactly. Been there, done that, experienced this, and now I'm feeling all of what, even if I've been through it so many times, I feel it again, I'm hooked by it again. That's exactly what they say, the research says microaggressions are. They say that they're verbal, there's words, their actions, and their environments that basically give, it's tricky. When you say a slight, I'm not sure some of these are slights, which sounds like it maybe isn't that big of a deal. Was there a comment?
I just wanted to share another type of microaggression.
Please.
Noticing is a microaggression. So, like noticing that someone is hair is a different texture or different, whatever. Noticing that, oh, you're really short. Thanks. I've been living with this my entire life. Thank you. Whereas, like people who are in a position of privilege in the group or whatever aren't noticed.
Okay.
They are normal.
So the majority privileged identities are the standard, and those who don't have those or share those identities are called out or noticed as being different. Yeah. Please.
Fred Rogers, I'm the Grand Solace.
Hi, Fred.
I'm trying to understand this, and what I'm getting from the talk, this all presupposes that the people who engage in this believe that they're wrong. And there are cultural things that kind of push you to view the world and engage with people in a certain way. Again, presupposing that they're wrong. How do you deal with that?
Yep. Very, very good point. And the research that we'll be looking at right now addresses exactly what you're talking about. So they basically, the research suggests that often what we call a microaggression, either the noticing, the making of comments, as Dr. Pollard said, maybe out of ignorance, can be considered like a knee-jerk reaction where we, from our backgrounds, from the way we were raised, from the words we heard our parents use or the TV used, we basically model that behavior, those words, those actions, and it's almost like a knee-jerk thing. It's almost like, again, our first thought, maybe our unconscious bias first thought, and that's where we start sort of going in the wrong direction. So often automatic and unintentional, and again, based in unconscious bias, we did a lot of work on unconscious bias where due to the way our brains function and the way we were raised, we had biases around people or groups that we think those people belong to. And we might make a mistake, which is really an interesting, tricky situation too. But it's like, it can be considered, like a prick every day. Mosquitoes are constantly biting me, and after a while, maybe you get used to it. You're used to the itching, the scratching, the this and the that, and yet it doesn't let you perform at your best at Montgomery College. It adds up, and sometimes, if you get too many mosquito bites, it leads to infection. It leads to really bad things. People leave. And you're like, why did they leave? I thought they were having a good experience here at Montgomery College. Why did they leave? What's going on with that? So often they occur on a daily basis, maybe multiple times every day. I had a friend of mine refer me to a friend of hers that wanted to move to Mexico, and she goes, I'm a woman of color, I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, I've lived here for 30 years, I can't take it anymore. I want to move to Mexico, and I know that you know about Mexico. Can you help me? I mean, literally, she said, I can't take it anymore. Every day, things keep happening. And now I think in our current environment, I think that's even escalated. So it also basically, they say microaggressions are, they communicate hostility. They communicate a negative viewpoint of the groups we think someone belongs to. And again, we might make mistakes about that. And this is really tricky. This is, again, the unintentional part, the intent versus the impact. I might not have intended to put someone down. I was thinking my noticing was kind of a nice thing, way to go with whatever you noticed. But the impact is the part that gets us into a bad place. And they say that microaggressions really perpetuate a sense of supremacy. It's part of the system that keeps people who have less power without that power and in their place, or we're going to put you in your place. So white supremacy, Christian supremacy, male supremacy, heterosexual supremacy, social economic supremacy. And at GW, we never talk about that one. Never. We're so expensive, and people are embarrassed, and students are like, I don't know what to do when my roommates want to go out and go to these fancy clubs all the time, and I have no money. We never talk about that supremacy. Cisgender supremacy for our transgender folks. Boy, we have sort of the new arena for us around identity is really our transgender, non-binary students. It's quite remarkable. Able-bodied supremacy. There's all different kinds of supremacy that's being perpetuated through this system, this activity of microaggressions. So it perpetuates a worldview that some people are more valuable, worldview or at Montgomery College, than other people. Any thoughts? Does this make sense? Does it sound familiar? Can you, maybe some of you know this firsthand and you're like, yeah, tell me something I don't know. This is what the research is saying microaggressions are all about, and that's what we'll be looking at now. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about, there's three categories that research suggests sort of define microaggressions, and it's a little tricky. I want to push back maybe a little bit. They call one microassaults. I'm not sure there is such a thing as a microassault, but this idea is that it's blatant, it's meant to hurt people, and maybe the micro part is that maybe it's not physical, technically. Maybe it's more intimidation, maybe it's more, so they talk about it as deliberate, it's explicit. People are trying to put people in their place. It's intentional to hurt, the intention is to hurt. It really is out there to hurt. The next one would be microinsults. And again, I'm sorry, these are some examples that I'm using, and I hope it doesn't hurt people again. Maybe we might laugh because we're like, oh my goodness, I hear this all the time, or what? But this is my daily experience. But they say microinsults, grounded in unconscious bias, convey insensitivity and are rude, demean an individual's identity or heritage. Microinvalidations. I just put on my Facebook, and I got like so many responses. I got so many, excuse me, so many reposts. Have people heard of heap-eating? Instead of repeating, when a woman says something in a meeting, a man says it, it's heap-eated, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what a great idea. I never heard that term, and I posted it on my Facebook page, and literally like every woman friend reposted it on their page. And I see it, I work in the Multicultural Center, and we had two women on our staff, and one woman would say, this happens to me literally like every day in our staff meetings, or every week in our staff meetings. I'm like, we're at the Multicultural Student Services Center. So there's this idea, I use this image of, we have lots going on of who we are. We might be male, we might be female, we might be a woman, we might be a man, we might be a person of color, all different colors, all different things put together. So, my boss, an African-American man, the he thing happened all the time. And so, because we have maybe one or multiple minority identities, doesn't preclude us from experiencing or expressing our own microaggression. And it became a thing for us. So microinvalidations, they talk about exclude, negate, and or nullify, but also the whole noticing thing. The whole noticing thing can be part of that too. So again, this is a lot of information, but trying to show the research saying that there are different types of ways that this happens. And these are 3 categories that folks say might be kind of handy for us to think about when we experience things or see things unfolding in front of us. Any comments about this? Does this resonate with people? Does this make sense? Do you feel like this is? Yeah, comment?
Thank you for putting it up there like that. I mean, seeing it helps to quantify the experience. I mean, I think a lot of people have these experiences in their own silo, right? In their own personal things that we're able to share in a commune in a sense.
Sure. And thanks for being co-chair for the committee, Ramon. Any other comments?
So what about the deliberate part of this?
About the what?
What about the deliberate part of microaggressions?
Right.
The way people use them to
Right.
control their interpersonal interactions.
Right.
Because where I sit, people come and talk to me in my office all the time about this person is deliberately doing this to me.
Right.
What are you going to do with that?
Right. So this is where the motivation, the heart motivating part, the emotional part of our brain we need to be motivated through hopefully the carrot and less the stick. But we need the stick. We need the policies and we need the accountability. Everyone, we just do. That's why we have laws around protected classes and this and that, because we know it happens. The trick is, will there be follow through and follow up around accountability? That's the trick. I mean, it really is the trick. You have a great list of, civility codes and this and that, and we might have policy here, policy there. But in the nitty-gritty, in the day-to-day, how does this work? And so Dr. Pollard talked about, the whistleblower protection and the non-retaliation policy and this and that. That's got to be real. That has to be real. And from listening to Dr. Pollard, I mean, she's taking this earnestly. And so that's why the team of Montgomery College, your teams, with the interesting, multiple campuses and this wonderfully huge student body, you got a lot going on here. And so everyone has to buy in and be vigilant. And we'll be looking at that in just a moment. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments? Yeah, Sharon. Right.
Some people don't want to necessarily talk about it. They just experience it. And so what are some suggestions on, I talk about having a speak up culture, but really getting people to believe that they can speak up.
Right. We'll be looking, that's exactly what we're coming to, which is awesome. Thank you for bringing that up. And it's tricky because, again, it's like the burden is on the victim. And I'm so sorry, and it's not fair. It is so not fair.
So I'm going to say the burden is.
I'm not trying to be rude. I just want to say, can we please use the mic? Because I really want to hear everybody's comments, and I know it might be an awkward pause, but if we could maybe stand or raise our hands so that the mic comes so that everybody can hear what's being said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Thanks.
So while I can appreciate this, and I certainly appreciate it, the information is very valuable, I have fatigue. Like, I'm done. So the idea that it is my responsibility to coach people to, it's from early on, it's been the hair, it's been the angry black woman trope, it's been, what other people experience is frustration. When I experience frustration, it comes across in a certain way. It's being in groups, with people of color, and we're talking, and there's staring, and there's the, I'm over it. So I can appreciate it, and certainly I'm here because I want to be committed to it, but I'm going to be honest and transparent and say I am fatigued. So if we,
Yep.
and I'm going to say, I likely am not the only person, and so if our intent here today is truly to be committed to this, we absolutely need to make sure we're following through, because
Yep.
if we don't,
Yep.
we're going to run into an instance where many of us
Yep.
are just like,
Right.
okay,
You're moving to Mexico. Yeah.
yeah.
No, really. That's
real talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Any other comments before we move on?
Jason, right there.
You know, at some point, you have to get past that. You can't talk about it anymore. And all you have left is your anger. So where we're not speaking up, that's the time when you respond.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's all you have left.
Yeah.
And then you come across as an angry black woman.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just thinking of the reality of the thing. We're all on the same journey. We're all going to make mistakes. It's going to continue. But the idea of empathy for each other, and actually I have a little bit of faith in each other that we can learn and change, and just provide that respect to each other to kind of help each other grow. So I know it gets frustrating. I mean, I work at, I'm the accessible technology coordinator for the campus, and I work with like disabilities and things like that. And I see so many even students and employees that sometimes their disability is this invisible. So something that somebody can't see, and they're still being judged, and they feel like they have no voice. And thinking about just sharing with other people, just that empathy, just so that we can get past that anger and that hate and that fatigue. And I think all of us could say that we feel that fatigue. So just kind of that empathy.
Yep. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Can we make sure that we hold the mic about 2 inches?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Or on our
Yes,
chin
yeah.
so we can hear stuff?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. I want to transition now, switch gears around the impact, and I'm very specific about the impact of microaggression because I think it feels like you got, really beaten up, and the fatigue that people are expressing here is real. So the impact of microaggressions in terms of what research tells us, but you're like, I don't need any research. This is like my experience. I can tell you what it is. According to the research, this idea of not knowing what to do when things start unfolding again and again and again, those mosquitoes are constantly chasing you. So just not sort of knowing what to do. So the internal dilemma, they say, that exists when a microaggression is experienced by somebody. So they talk about, wait, is there something wrong with me? Did I interpret this right? Is this really what happened, that a guy just said what I just said, and all of a sudden everyone's like applauding? Did she say what I think she said? So all these thoughts going in our head. What did he mean by that? What? Was that a compliment? What was that? Should I say something? That whole business of the fatigue, again, the victim trying to figure this out. Saying something might make it worse. They will probably think I'm overreacting. Oh, the H word, hysterical, you're being hysterical. The A word, you're being angry. Wait a minute, what's going on here? What's going on here? Speaking up is going to hurt me more than it helps. So the idea, can you imagine having all these thoughts in our head when something happens and catches us off guard, or maybe it doesn't because we're used to it. Maybe it doesn't. But yet all of these mental gymnastics that people are trying to navigate as they're in a meeting, maybe with their boss, there's power dynamics going on, maybe they're in a group setting, and it's hard to speak publicly about anything. We just had a huge all GW talk with our president. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. Sorry about that, but I'm not going to say anything. And I was really amazed that other people actually took the microphone and pushed back on what our new president was saying. So all this stuff, they say, is going on in our heads, and maybe this is nothing new for many people in the room. So when this is happening, you cannot serve each other and the students of Montgomery College at your best. You just can't. So we're trying to remove this obstacle to clear away the pathway so that you can do your jobs the best that you can possibly do them. It basically, they say it ties us up in knots, that our brain is like, what do I do, what do I do? And it puts us at a vulnerable position where our strengths are not at the forefront. We don't have access to our abilities and our normal sort of competency. Our capacity is decreased. The psychological impact, and this is a lot of stuff, the psychological impact of microaggressions through research says all of this happens. And if this happens, I'm not going to be at my best at Montgomery College. So this is real. Research suggests all this stuff happens, and people move to Mexico. People check out. You might check out but still get a paycheck. You might be here, but you're just going through the motions. And that's work is work. I'm not idealizing work. I wouldn't mind, volunteering at an Alaskan state park as I did over the summer, like all the time. But we are committed through our personal values, our professional values, and then the code of civility to a vision of education, which is amazing here. So we're off balance. When all of this stuff happens, oops. Sorry about that. When all of this stuff happens, we're off balance, and when you're off balance, you're vulnerable. You're not at your best. I think groups being targeted historically in this country keeps them off balance so that employers can exploit. Banks can do predatory loans. All this stuff can happen when we're off balance. And they're saying that microaggressions, it knocks us off balance. And that's not where we need to be. And that's not where Montgomery College employees and team needs to be. So again, you have the Code of Ethics that tries to right the path, to put us back on balance, to remember that fairness and honesty really are what drives our administration. And there's follow-up, there's accountability, there's policies. This happens, it's not only my responsibility, I'm exhausted to speak up, but there's a system in place, an infrastructure based on this Code of Ethics. Any thoughts before we move on? The next part is sort of like, what do we do? Any thoughts before we move on? Yeah.
Maybe you're going to cover this next, but I think that are things that more privileged bystanders can do in group situations, whether they address it with the person in the group or afterwards.
Okay.
But say you're in a group and you are, and it's a microaggression based on race, and you're a white person who hears another white person say something.
Yeah.
I think that you could you could say something in the moment, or you could say something later to that person.
Mm-hmm.
For it could be something that's a microaggression that's based on sexual orientation, same thing. If you're heterosexual and the other person is, maybe you could speak up and say something so that it's not all on the person who's experiencing the microaggression to say something.
Excellent. So leveraging access to privileged spaces. The trick is not speaking for other people. So how does that work? And that's a tough balance. I find it a tough balance. When do I make space, and when do I intervene? And that's that cultural intelligence that I think we need to learn and practice. And it's not easy. I find it very difficult. But thank you for bringing that up. Using identity-based privilege in a way that empowers everybody, but doesn't speak for. Yep. Yeah.
To actually have information that we can take back to the other 8,000 people who work here that aren't here, because I believe that the people that are in this room are here and dedicated to trying to make a difference. They want to be here, and so they took the time to show up. There are a lot of other people who aren't here, and so the environments that we may go back to are really where much of the information that we're hearing actually needs to go?
Yeah.
And is that something that you're going to make recommendations on how we approach it from that perspective?
You're here, and people say, you know, preaching to the choir is a waste of time. I don't think so. I think supporting those who, with intention, are trying to live up to that civility code, that's one piece of the puzzle. And you're right, you're absolutely right. There's a bigger, broader community that's not here, and we need to share. We need to be ambassadors of our knowledge and direction, which is the sort of goal of removing that obstacle of microaggressions in terms of changing behavior. But you're absolutely right. So this is something that maybe Sharon can address. You know, how do we, in the next section, how do we perpetuate this? How do we share this information? How do we scale up? But I think preaching to the choir is important. I think those of you who are here, who are dedicated, either through negative experiences or through positive commitment or whatever, you deserve this time, and I think it's spectacular that you've chosen to be here.
Sorry, I always like piggybacking on other people's ideas. I would extend that also to thinking about power dynamics and how they're involved. I know you mentioned that earlier, but I think it's one thing to be able to put into practice what we're learning today, to be able to interact with our colleagues and peers and students when there is not a power dynamic. And I think based on what Sharon shared with some of the results from the survey, what you've alluded to is what are the tools we can also have to be effective in spaces where we are in, where the person that we are experiencing these challenges with have the positionality over us to have the potential to impact our career, our trajectory, our opportunities, our flexibility, our everything.
Your advancement?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. You're right. That's where, again, it's like the simultaneous, there's all these pieces to this puzzle. This is one piece. And I really appreciate what you're saying. The power dynamic, can you imagine, you know, looking at the student experience that you talked about, the student with a professor? What if I'm an undocumented student wanting to voice my concern about how I'm being treated by this professor in this class? Like what, you know, I'm not sure I'm saying anything. You're absolutely right. If you don't mind, let's move on to sort of switching gears toward sort of what can we do, the illumination of how we can address what can I do around microaggression. So I think two things. We have responsibility, I have responsibility. Even if I've experienced microaggressions and I'm fatigued by it, I still probably have microaggression within me. And then how do we respond to microaggression when we experience it ourselves? So preventing my own microaggression, basically we have to look at ourselves around our core beliefs. We have to look at what is our first thought. We have to look at who we are and what we believe about groups of people and our colleagues, about that new person who walked through the door and is part of our team now. What was my first thought? What am I really thinking? Do I feel like they're going to be an asset? Do I feel like it's going to be a negative experience? So self-reflection. You know, we all hear this thing. I grew up hearing that little rhyme, but words do hurt. Words do hurt. And so we need to be conscious of that. We need to recognize that. We need to acknowledge that. Dismissive or acknowledging, calling someone out around their difference. Labels, you know, our brains use labels. And yet we need to really, with intention, try to avoid using labels of our colleagues. And it seems like when I feel the most threatened or tired or almost like halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, I revert back to my labels. Because it's like the easiest thing to help me like figure out something. You know, it's like, oh yeah, so blah, blah, blah. Because I'm just, you know, it's the easiest thing. So avoid labeling others. Again, our first thought, when that new person came into my office, when that student came into my office, did I have a first thought about, oh, you know, I see whatever I see, whatever I think I see, and then I make all these assumptions about them. So monitor my assumptions and my first thoughts about people, and then build common ground. The idea of, I mean, Montgomery College is amazing. You have so many diverse folks, so building common ground is really, really important. Responding to microaggression, oof, you know, taking a deep breath or two. The idea of, and it's difficult. My boss always says, from the Quaker perspective, seek the light in others, or something like, look for the light in other people. So imagine and assume good intent, even when the words might not have come across that way. Assume offense was not the intent. It might have been, but we can start first with assuming it wasn't. Explain it. Why was this hurtful? And again, this is the burden. I'm sorry, this is the burden, but Dr. Pollard was trying to reference that as well. Explaining, if you can, why this was a slight or an offensive statement or action. Ask a question. Who are you referring to when you say that? What do you mean? I mean, what do you mean is such a easy question to say, you know? What do you mean by that? And you don't have to do it in like, what do you mean by that? But what do you mean? And then that sort of interrupts the train of what's unfolding, and maybe the person will realize that really wasn't the thing to say. So ask a follow-up question. And then I think, honestly, taking care of yourself first. The safety topic that someone brought up. You have to be in a safe place with safe people. And I think Sharon's offering resources around that safety. So finding a safe space with safe people where you have confidentiality and you know there's accountability through the conversation. You know, sometimes it might not be worth it. Sometimes, you know, I don't know. Maybe this is one battle I'm not going to fight. And I need to take care of myself. So, you know, I'm so sorry. Again, this is sort of your work, but I am so impressed that you're trying to do it. It's really remarkable. And you can hopefully have something to reflect on in terms of this information. It's supposed to be direction and knowledge to the rider, all of us, the riders on that elephant, so that we can change our own behavior first. And you might say, you know, I'm the victim of microaggression all the time, and yet maybe I do it too. My boss, I'm sure as an African-American man, experiences microaggressions all the time, and the he-peat thing, you know, it's kind of his trademark almost. And so we need to reflect on ourselves. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and attention, and great job to you. Really great job. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
For sharing all of that with us. And I really appreciate everyone in the audience for not only listening, but sharing your experiences and participating. Yeah. We're going to talk now a little bit about the surveys and some things that we want to address. So, again, in honoring our space, I just ask for you all to just, you know, listen and take it in, share, and any suggestions and thoughts that you may have. I'm open to hearing them, and even if you don't want to share here and you want to talk about something, I'm open to that too. I think people that have come to see me know that I have an open door policy, so just come on in. Now, we're not taking an official break at this time, but you know, feel free to take care of your bio breaks and all that while we're talking. As soon as we're done with this segment in about an hour, we will go right into the next session. Okay?
Great. I think we're putting the next. Yep. Yeah. Okay, so now Sharon and I are going to sort of walk us through a bit of a reflection on the survey, some of the key points of it. Again, my name is Timothy, he, him, and his. Sharon.
I am she,
her,
and, oh, sorry. Was that not good? She, her, and hers.
Awesome. Again, this is another time for humility, because the survey results, there were some challenges there, some significant challenges, some difficulties there. And so this is a time of humility, but you're on a path, hopefully a nice fall path, a journey that you're continuing to take. And so from the results of, do you want to share some of the results now? And you might have different reactions to the results. Do you want to share some of the highlights?
So I put out a college-wide memo earlier this year, and I gave you all the results of the survey. I'm not sure if anyone had a chance to read that or remember that, but we had recurring themes. And one of those themes was around retaliation, another around bullying, and then there was some, quite a few, attaboy, attagirl comments as well. But we really wanted to focus our attention on what's next. We had these surveys. Yeah, thanks for listening. And then what? And so in my earlier talk today, I talked about some of the things that management, leadership, what have you, are doing at that level to address some of the things that we heard. But we really want to hear from you. I want to hear from you, and for your own thoughts and suggestions about maybe some of those things. So this is the time for us to interact. I really hate being on the stage. I kind of want to get down there. Can I do that?
Sure.
Can I do that? All right. So I kind of like pulling up a chair, and I wish we all had a big circle, but we don't. So I'm just going to sit here. And maybe we could just chat for a little bit. So go ahead.
So you might have different reactions to sort of the negative results. My understanding, Sharon shared the report with me, the summary with me as well, and that some of the indicators, a significant amount of the indicators, have gotten more negative reviews. And so you might have all different kinds of reactions. You might be surprised at that because your experience might seem to be okay or maybe even improved. You might be sad because of your commitment to your office, to Montgomery College. So we have all different kinds of reactions. And so this segment now is designed to say, you are moving forward. Dr. Pollard is talking about all different steps to move forward. Sharon's talking about all these different things that you're doing to help you keep moving forward. And it might not be this beautiful, rosy, going into the sunset kind of deal, but you're moving forward, which is remarkable. So there are 5 questions that are in your bags, and they're on these different colored index cards.
So does everybody have their bag? And if you don't, we'll get you one, because there's some work in there. Does anybody, you need a bag? Yeah. Who's in the back? Kevin, do you mind grabbing a few bags from the registration? Thank you so much. Yeah.
So we're transitioning a little bit from looking at the reality of microaggression in terms of the research, and it might have triggered some reactions in you around your own experience. So we're going from that reality to constructive next steps and follow-up. And so these 5 questions were decided to be the most relevant based on the areas in the surveys that were the most negative in terms of people saying, we really need to change this because my experience is not good. And I want to stay here, I feel fatigue, and so what's going to happen? And the leadership of Montgomery College is committed to working on this. So we have 5 questions, and each one is on a different colored card. What we are asking us to do today is to spend basically 10 minutes on each question. So the idea is you see the first card, which is, I'm actually colorblind, so I think this is purple, a purple card. And the idea is for you to read the question and try to give some constructive feedback of what would work for you. And I love the way the first question is written, knowing our budget constraints. And it's not trying to be like, oh, you know, budget, we don't have any money for anything, but just saying, you know, I would like my boss to give me a free trip to Tahiti because I did a great job on this program. Honestly, if he says thank you, I'm like, I'll do anything. Well, actually, if he does thank you and then there's some other incentive, I'll do anything. And you know, it's amazing how small things really do make a difference. So the first question is, knowing our budget constraints, in what ways could Montgomery College show our appreciation of you in an equitable way? So like, what would work for you around acknowledgement of your contribution? So the micro affirmations or macro affirmations. If my boss personally says thank you to me for doing a good job, actually, I really appreciate that. If he recognizes me within our staff department, within the university, then I feel, wow, that's sort of the next step up. So if you could take out this first card.
You have index cards in your bags, right? Some blank ones, are there? Yes, no, maybe so. Who has index cards in this room? Somebody. There's some extra index cards that we wanted to pass around because, you know, some people don't want to talk out loud. And so you can write them down, your thoughts. Are there any in the bags? Can someone just look and tell me? No? Okay.
And so the guidelines for this program are a bit like the guidelines we had for the first session. I wanted to add one. I love nature documentaries, and I've been watching a lot recently. Has anyone read anything or heard anything about the amazing bumblebee and like what it's able to do that you're not really thinking it might be able to do? Or anyone familiar about the bumblebee? Like what? Like what's going on with it? It's, oh, wait for the mic, yeah. Teamwork, all right.
Is it on now? There we go. I can hear it now. So I'm just getting into it. So I'm allergic, so I'm reading more.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's not traumatic for me. So much of our, I think, agricultural, much of our food, basically, bees make possible. So I'm reading, because I'm always like, kill the bees. But
oh no,
I mean, I'm allergic. I have a legit reason.
Right.
But no, I'm reading more about it. So I'm noticing that so much of the food that we eat would not be possible without it. And there's a significant decline in the population of bees. And so trying to ferret out the reasons why. So I'm just doing basic research.
Awesome. And they also say, it's amazing, they also say that with this, I would say, ample body, and with these teeny weeny wings, they say aerodynamically, according to the laws of physics, it's not supposed to be able to fly. Which is like, oh my goodness, like we think we're so smart, and we have all these laws of physics or whatever, and yet this bee makes all of our food possible. And so the guideline that I recommend that we add for today is thinking in a positive way, and in like what's possible here at Montgomery College. And that's the spirit of sort of looking at these questions. What's a positive approach to this question? And what do you think is possible? Because we can change. We really can. You know, it's amazing what we can do. And if we're intentional about it, we can change. So let's dive in. I love your pool. Is this Rockville?
Oh, that's okay.
That's your pool. And one of your I think it's Rockville. So let's dive in. So the first question is, again, look at your card. Knowing our budget constraints, in what ways can Montgomery College show our appreciation of you in an equitable way? So maybe list one or two items that you think would make a difference for you and for other people. So just spend a minute now writing a couple ideas on the back of the card.
Okay. Oh, hi. How are you all? What are we doing? Are we jotting something down and we're talking about them? Is that what we're doing? Okay. Great. Thanks. So, celebrate the many forms of diversity with information and education for the community. Oh, this is a good one. Quick did you know facts sent out college-wide on a regular basis. Incorporate more opportunities for staff learning when it isn't crazy busy during the heart of the semester. That's really good. How do we do that? It was so hard trying to find a date for this. And every time I started planning this in July. And you look at the whole calendar for the whole year, and everything's on the calendar already. So I really want to figure out, can you come in for a second, please? Jackie Zappala, the executive assistant extraordinaire over there, walking down. So I would love to figure out better planning. Isn't there a calendar committee that we have or something? Do we have that here? An academic calendar? Who's that? Who's on that? Anybody in this room? Anybody on that? Who's in academic affairs? I know at least half the people in this room are in academic affairs. Can somebody remember that one? We got to talk about this calendar thing. All right, let's see. I'm not really sure what this one says. I think it says, continue to pay everyone on time. Do we not get paid on time sometimes?
What's wrong with
No, I don't know this. I've only been here 2 years.
I think the first one wasn't the correct one. But I
Really?
This is the right one. The first one wasn't the right one because we changed the order. But that's okay. This is the right one.
Okay, are these all the right slides?
Who in finance is in this room? Where's Donna Shen? I know she's supposed to be. Oh, she's acting today. She might not be in this room. But we need to write that one. We need to write that one down. I mean, we got a lot to write down. You're not going to get to all of them because I got a whole bunch. But that's one that's really, I didn't know that. That's not fair. All right, so send appreciation certificate or thank you letter to employees without considering skin color or race. Make sure that we have work-life balance. Acknowledgement, investigate departments and see firsthand if things are being ran fairly, civilly, and efficiently. I think yeah, that's right. Speak about accomplishments more often. I'm not exactly sure what this says, but I'm going to read it. Only the college shows equal for the, okay, I can't read that one, sorry. All right, keep asking for input before decisions are made to create a fair process. And we should also explain why certain decisions are made. So I got that. You know what? Someone came to my office once and said, this decision was made. I was told about it in passing. And then next thing I know, it's a college-wide memo and it went out. So I think that this is really important because then when you're trying to implement a new policy or some work, and you were just told about it without asking your thoughts about how you're going to actually do it, I think this deserves some further discussion, clarification. All right, so I'm not going to, I had 10 minutes on this, right? Okay. Every department could give an equity inclusion award, small. Maybe it's just a public acknowledgement, but it brings to the fore that this is important in our particular area, for our particular discipline, and not just for quote-unquote others or those interested. So these are some good suggestions. I like this. Let's see, I said that one already.
How about one more?
A lot of people had some of the same things. Students say thank you when we do a good job. We expect the same from the leaders at MC when we do a good job. People in the room that are leaders say thank you. No, but that's important. Oh my gosh. Let me tell you something. So this takes a lot of work putting in program. I know people that do programs all the time. It takes a lot of work to put on a program, and I know you know. There's some people that have programs often, and just the teamwork that I've experienced here at the college, and I'm sure many of you too, you also in this room have, is to me has been just heartwarming and remarkable, and I feel like even people that I don't necessarily work with, I'm going to be able to have conversations with about teamwork and collaboration. And I'm big on collaboration. Some people want you to just tell them what to do, and I prefer, can we talk about what we should do? So that's my particular strategy.
Okay, Sharon, how about if we move on to the second question?
Okay, thank you for that.
So the second question deals with communication. So it seems like there's a disconnect, and many institutions experience this. There's a disconnect between those making decisions and communicating them to those who have to abide by those decisions or implement those decisions. And so communication is key. So the next question is on your green card, and it's asking you for ways to help improve communication at Montgomery College. This could be on a macro level, from Dr. Pollard, Dr. Stewart, Ms. Bland, and it could be more within your department, it could be within your specific team in office. So what recommendations do you have? Because the survey said that communication within your very large and complicated set of campuses and communities, has been a challenge. So what communication improvements would you recommend? And you choose if it's going to be on a macro level, a micro level. What makes sense to you to help you get the information you need to be successful and to thrive at Montgomery College?
So if we could just do popcorn responses, that would be good for this one. I mean, feel free to write them down as well, just so that we have a record of them. But it would be great if anyone who's willing to share, just give us an idea. What changes can MC make to improve communication with you?
Use computer conferencing so we don't have to go to another campus sometimes. I mean, I understand sometimes opening meetings we have to all go, but
I agree with that.
Thank heavens we have email now. I've been here a long time, and I remember when we didn't.
Did you get that, Ramon? Like Zoom, GoToMeeting. Right. Anybody else?
Recommendation, when there is an internal application for employment, not only receiving an acknowledgement email, but when the position is actually filled and closed, receiving the closeout of that just to let folks know that the position has been closed.
Within departments, at the beginning of the semester or the previous semester, making it clear what the teaching assignments are and if extra ESH is available, so that everyone has the opportunity to pick and choose, as opposed to certain individuals getting information about extra ESH opportunities that you didn't hear about. So ESH, equivalent semester hours, we're required to do 30 per academic year, 15 per semester. We can go up to 18, and any ESH over 15 per semester equals overtime. So there's opportunities within a department, but certain individuals are contacted, do you want extra ESH? Do you want this opportunity? Make the opportunity available to everyone.
So that's interesting. I didn't know that, but I'd like to ask. I'd like to ask somebody who does know about this. How does that work? Who can answer that question that's in here? Let's see. Maybe Dr. Sneezek, would you like to take a crack at answering that one? I simply don't know that answer.
Okay, ESH is a tricky thing. Full-time faculty must put in a total of 30 hours of ESH per academic year. Additional ESH is up to the discretion of the department chair and or the dean. And so there is, depending upon the area, I don't know which area we're talking about here, but for instance, we have coordinator ESH for certain courses. We have tutor ESH that's available. We have special project ESH that's available. So there's a lot of different forms that ESH can take.
So question is, we can talk further about this, but is there at the beginning of the year or even in the summer, like a list?
We do not have a list in our area. I would recommend that people who would like to get this additional ESH, what's called alternate ESH, would talk with their chair and with their dean.
But what I'm trying to get to is the fairness of that, right? So if, I might have a great relationship with my dean and I get all the ESH, for example. I mean, I don't know if this happens, I'm just saying.
I'm sure it does happen at some level, yes. It doesn't happen in our area. but in our area, and it actually varies by campus. So for instance, at the Takoma Park campus, we have about 5 or 6 coordinators. At Germantown, we only have 1 coordinator in biology. So it varies by campus as well.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that particular?
Yeah, I think, you want to say something? I saw your hands up earlier.
I'm a former department chair, and we tried to work this out in our department. So especially for coordinator ESH, when I was chair, we made sure to have a 3-year term. So we had terms, and then at the end of someone's term, we would put out a call saying, anyone interested in taking this on, please do so. So it was a department and dean decision. To be clear, if someone currently in the position really wanted to stay for another term, I always said that as well in the call out, just to be clear. But we decided that we should have terms of 3 years for each coordinator position. And I think it's a great way to distribute the leadership, and it also helps the person in the position keep fresh and reflect on what they're doing and decide if, yes, I do want to continue in this role or maybe do something different. So
what department are you in?
English.
So I would bet that not every department has the same role, right? Is that right? They're all, okay. You mind sending me an email about that? Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Sharon, do you want to get a couple other ideas about communication improvement?
And then we have to move on?
We have one more here.
Okay.
I would also say that it depends on the number of faculty that you may have in your department as to how the ESH is distributed. I mean, for me, I have more part-timers than I do full-time. So
where are you?
I'm in health sciences. So it,
I think to be fair though, in this process, one might have, because I've applied for 3 positions since I've been here, roughly in the last year because my grade is sunsetting. And so I think when you don't hear back, you're like, well, I want to stay because this is a great place to work, but I haven't heard back. Well, let me not speak for everybody, I'll speak for Tori. I haven't heard back, so let me just go ahead and slide it in. It probably won't make a whole lot of a difference, but let me go ahead. And essentially, it ends up being minimal effort. You don't hear anything, like you submit your resume, and again, speaking from my experience only, you'll get a Workday email, but you have to be in Workday to see that email. There's no open acknowledgement of it, and then you don't get any sort of, like, as far as I'm concerned, all the positions I applied for are still open. So, because I didn't hear not a text message, a phone call, a flag, a carrier pigeon to say, hey, thanks, but we filled the position. And I want to be real clear, because oftentimes my passion about this comes across in a way that, oh, well, she wasn't selected, therefore she must be angry. I'm a talented person and I'll figure it out. What I'm upset about is that if we have internal candidates and we say that we value our most valuable resource next to our students is our employees, and at minimum, we don't say thanks but no thanks, that's a serious problem for me. And I've voiced that concern several times and it hasn't been heard.
Well, it's heard now. So I can guarantee you that.
I think that brings up another issue, though. We have a lot of internal candidates that may not have the exact experience but would be a good fit, but because our system is so structured, we can't really consider them, right? We've got these guidelines that we've got to go check, 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 check as we're reviewing resumes, and they're disqualified even though you may know that person and know they could be a great fit. So I think the larger system needs to be looked at.
Thank you for that, Stacy. Carla, you're taking notes, right? Absolutely. All right, thank you.
So I was...
oh, sorry. Our hands for the mic, our hands for the mic, or hands for cards? Cards. Okay.
Okay. So the other thing I would say that I have found has been, or that inhibits people's ability to apply for certain jobs or be considered, is that, and this is probably an issue with the system or how we're evaluating experience, I think that we have a responsibility. You know, we talk about retention with students, but I think retention of talent is equally important. Actually, let me just go on a tangent very quickly. I'm going to come back. I think everything that we think is important with students is important for us, and everything that's important for us is important with students. Okay, that being said, we should be creating opportunities for individuals who are talented here at the organization, or those that can become talented and more skilled in certain areas, to be able to have the opportunities here, even if they're informal, right? So if you can participate in some sort of ad hoc committee, et cetera, and be able to use that experience to apply for another position, because often what happens, and I'm gonna give you a very concrete example, there are a lot of individuals that are in support, administrative support roles, who supervise student workers.
Right.
But if you want to apply for a position that requires supervisory experience, it's like that perpetual issue. How can I get supervisory experience if it requires it and nobody will give it to me, right? And so what comes first, the egg or the chicken, right? So if you have administrative support, as an example, supervising student workers, and they're often required to develop the same skill set, why can that not be considered for supervisory experience when you're applying for another job? Or if you've had to manage a team of people because you're on a committee and you're charged with moving work or initiatives or projects forward, why can that not be used in your official experience to apply for another position? So I think creating opportunities for folks that are here to get experience that there's no other way for them to get unless they leave the institution. And why would we want some of our best, most talented people to have to leave when there are some simple things that we could do to qualify the experience that they're getting in other ways here?
So I do have a response to that, but I want to give Carla an opportunity to respond to any of the things that we've heard today. I know Maria wants the mic in the back also.
Okay, so I'm taking all of this in, and I definitely...
tell people who you are.
Oh, I'm Carla Ammerman. I think I'm the only one from HR here today. You know, just going back to everything that I'm taking in and that I've heard today, a lot of people, when they're done, when they're ready to move to Mexico with the microaggressions, they come to me, and I hear them, and I listen. And it's hard. It's really hard to be that police person. It's hard to say, gosh, I'm sorry everyone in your office is speaking Spanish and you don't speak Spanish, but we don't have a policy. You know, it's hard to not have a policy on everything. So there's that. With regard to the recruitment, we do count different parts of managerial experience. Supervising students, for example, would definitely count as supervisory experience. But also going back to what Sharon said, we see a lot of internal applicants who say, oh, I've been here for 5 years, you know me, you know what I've done, and they don't take the time to put it on their application, on their resume, to say, I participated in this committee, I came to this forum, I did all these other things. Not everybody remembers to include it, and they assume you know me, which puts the committee and the hiring manager in a very difficult situation.
Thank you for that.
So that's part
Maria,
of it.
a comment. Can you hand the mic to Maria in the back, please? Thank you. Thank you, Carla.
Thanks. I appreciate what's been said, but what I really feel is that the system is broken and that we need to acknowledge that it's broken and fix it with urgency. Not fix it next year, not fix it 3 years from now, but fix it now with urgency. There have been countless times when I would go to various higher level people for advice, and I was told on more than one occasion, you should leave. Go somewhere else, find opportunity somewhere else. Retention of our employees is so critical, and the messaging that is out there to employees is inconsistent. And so it would be valuable, I think, to move forward and acknowledge the problems and then take action to fix them with urgency.
Sharon, that's a good segue into our next question, if that's okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
So our next question is really an overarching question. It's on the blue card, question number 4. What specific initiatives would demonstrate to you that Montgomery College is committed to your inclusion and equitable treatment as a valued employee? So that's a bit broad, but it's like fixing this big, broken system. So what specific initiatives, either large or small, that you would say, you know, I got my weekly did you know update about the achievements of African American people in the United States, or I received this information, or I saw this program happen, which really shows me that I am welcomed here, I'm valued here, and I'm included here. So if you spend a couple minutes just thinking about that, and then Sharon will engage your ideas.
So I have one already, and it is create a process where we can identify staff and faculty evaluations that are not honest. I have noticed we tend to give satisfactory evaluations for troubled people that need to either improve or be let go. Also, some hiring committee members seem to be hung up on hiring people who are a good quote-unquote fit rather than qualified. Any other thoughts on this one? I want to see MC create a third non-binary option for student registration, hiring, and faculty and staff paperwork. Who's on this committee with me that is looking at this? Is anybody on this? Let's see, no, Maria, you're not on that. Maria, you might be the best person that I'm talking about our preferred names committee. Who's on that? Is anybody in this room on that subcommittee? Thank you. Jane Ellen, I'm about to hand you a mic.
And there are a lot of promising practices at other universities. At GW, we have tackled that same topic as well. And so there's lots of examples that can be adapted and adjusted to fit your community here. I'd be happy to talk about what we do at GW, but online there's a lot of examples in your market basket that I'm sure that would help guide your process as well.
We probably need some consultation on that.
Sure.
Tim, we're working on that right now. I want to finish this question, and then Jane Ellen, I'll give you an opportunity. I also want to see MC more inclusively and radically support LGBTQ+ students, faculty, and staff with relevant and appropriate services and handling chosen names. So I'm really excited about this question or comment, because in our roadmap for equity and inclusion roadmap that we're in the process of producing right now, we're talking about spaces around campus, around the college. And I asked a few people to work on a center, and I'll let Stacy talk about it as soon as Jane Ellen talks about the first part.
Okay, so I'm not sure what the first part is.
Preferred names.
I'm going to say something a little bit about the preferred names. So one of the things that we worked on through the committee was the need for a student in a course to have the ability to be called by their preferred name. And what we did, and it began this fall, for any student who's gone through the registrar's office, because that is the only area that can actually go into the system and change your name, there is now a preferred name field. And when we draw the class roster, the roster actually selects the preferred name first, so that in their courses, they will be called by the name that they prefer to be called by.
Thank you for that. Are we also working on a salutations? By the way, I just threw that in there. It was totally not part of it, probably. But the reason why I asked about salutations is because I was asked about it. So maybe we could add that to our committee. Okay.
Just an aside question that applies for students as well, because many of our immigrant students have that preferred name than the name that they come with from their country of origin.
Absolutely, thank you. Stacy. Okay.
Thank you. What I would like to say is nothing related to names, but as an international student, we do not have a lot of jobs opportunities as a citizen student have. I believe that Montgomery College should incorporating more jobs opportunity for international students, not on job related to make money, but even as a voluntary job. Why? Because we have a lot of gifted people around this Montgomery College, but we cannot share how talented we are. We cannot show it because we do not have the opportunity. When we started here to learn the language. And later on, we get engaged to community, Montgomery College faculty and people around us. We learn a lot. And therefore, we feel and we see that it's not how much the college can do for us, but it's what can we do for the college?
Thank you for that. I love that perspective. And I think that in advancement and community engagement, that division is looking at some ways to assist the international population. I think we had did we have a meeting on this, Donna? Were we talking about that? I'm sorry. Use the mic. Here.
We spoke about financial resources for international students.
scholarships and grants and what was available. There are some outside scholarships that focus on international students, and we provided a list on those. And then also the Montgomery College Foundation, on a case-by-case basis, provides scholarships to students, whether they're U.S. or international.
Oh, one more question, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry,
No
but
worries.
I had my hand up.
Oh, no, I appreciate
Sorry, we didn't see it.
Okay, and I just wanted to, I'm referring back to question 4. And I was thinking that one of the things that would show me that the college is about inclusivity would be more of, and I think it's not, and I'm not just, I don't think I'm the only one. I think that if the college management could show the same short, or either, when it comes to disciplinary actions and stuff like that, it seems like there's a short leash on staff, okay? But when it comes to managers who do exactly the same thing, I think that leash is a longer leash, okay? And it continues, and some things still are repeated, okay? And if it's repeated on the other end, then it can, that makes sense. Am I making sense to you?
You are.
Okay,
So I hear what you're saying.
And I think a lot of my colleagues feel the same way. And if you show that, and you show some change in that, I think you may have people following what you're trying to tell us and trying to get us to buy into. That's just my opinion.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
That is the opinion of many others. And Stan is a steward in the AFSCME union that represents staff. So am I, too, for that matter.
Okay. Thank you for that. Did we write that down, or did you write that down to give to us, Dan?
I didn't write it down. I didn't write it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You got it up there?
All right. Okay, great. I did want to address that one. I'm sorry, I know I'm over
No worry,
time.
no problem.
I'm about to be over time. It was the second part. It was the inclusive spaces. Stacy Gustafson, you're on that small committee. So I do these, anybody here, just raise your hand if you want to be on one of these. I do these what I call like mind trust. And I gather a group of people from either the President's Advisory Committee on Equity and Inclusion or people that I just randomly run into and say, hey, you want to work on this? And so I did that a couple times, and let me tell you some things that were produced. On the side of the wall, you'll see something called the cycle of change. And I went to a few people and said, I have this idea, and the next thing you know, this small group of people brainstormed and came up with this awesome cycle of change. So who are the people that worked on that in this room? I know Ramon, Stacy. Thank you. Anybody else? So thank you all so much for doing that. But a lot of these types of pop-up things is what I work on. And one of them is this idea about inclusive centers. So we have these, so through our research and discussions with many people we talked about, we have these international multicultural offices someplace but not every place. On some campuses but not every campus. And someone came to me and they were part of MC Pride and Allies and said, I really want a safe space for our meetings. I want to know when I go in this space that I'm going to feel welcome. And then there was a third person that said something similar, and I'm blanking on it right now, but I'm going to let Stacy talk. Who has the mic? Thank you. About some of our ideas. And then we'll move to the last question.
So basically, the subcommittee is looking at what other institutions are doing. Right now, we're looking at it through the lens of identity and inclusion, and what would that space look like? So researching other institutions for best practices, looking at some of the feedback that we had in the surveys, at the Student Voices activity a couple years ago in terms of not having the space, and looking across the 3 campuses. So as Sharon said, we may have a social justice institute on one campus, but there isn't a similar space on the other campuses. And so what can we feasibly recommend, understanding there are budget constraints and there are also space constraints. So this is just a very first look at what's out there and what might be helpful at MC, and then it'll be in Sharon's capable hands to take it to the next step.
Awesome. So the last question really is, the last question really is sort of whatever else you wanted to say that maybe you didn't feel comfortable saying, any other ideas you had, any ideas that were constructive, and if you have feedback that's critical, anything else you want to say, this salmon-colored card is where you can say that, and those will be collected and reviewed by Sharon and her team. So that's, you just want to take a minute, if there's any last thing, you don't have to share it publicly, but whatever last item that you wanted to have shared, you can put it on here. And certainly, as we talked about, success is absolutely in the follow-up. In the accountability of Sharon, Dr. Pollard, Dr. Stewart, Ramon, the whole committee, all of us, all of you have a place and a part to play. And success is definitely in the follow-up from this time together, from the ongoing dialogues that you're having. So Sharon listed these 3 ways to do follow-up. I love the FaceTime with Sharon. You could do, Sharon, maybe I'll FaceTime you later. But the idea that you can FaceTime Sharon, that she wants to be as accessible as possible to you. So again, follow-up is key. And if there's sort of if the commitment isn't perceived and understood as real and authentic, then the obstacles to reaching that goal of equity will increase. But Sharon is absolutely sincerely committed to this, and she offered these 3 specific ways, and I'm sure there's other ways as well. So I think we're going to wrap up and move on to the next part of the program.
Well, wow, this is a lot of sharing, I'm sure. For some people, I want to thank Tim. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and your commitment to this. I know some students have joined us, and if there's anybody that's still outside, Jason, could you do me a favor and check? I think that there were some students that were kind of waiting outside. I just want to jump into our next presentation. Tim, you're welcome to listen in on this. Before I do that, is there anything anybody wanted to share quickly about your experience thus far? Any comments for the good of the order that you might want to share? Okay, all right. So thank you for taking notes. I appreciate that. So I'm grateful for all of you that shared your feelings. I really, as I said, appreciate that and describe your experiences. And again, for new people to the room, my name is Sharon Bland. I appreciate the opportunity to open this session on racial equity and social justice. As you heard Dr. Darian Pollard this morning, our president has been leading the college on a path of radical inclusion over the past few years. And it is fitting that we are today having a dialogue session to discuss, among several things, what racial equity and social justice means to you. So Montgomery County's Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative was launched by Council President Nancy Navarro in January of this year, and legislation was proposed on September 17th. So this is a big deal in the county right now. How many people have heard about that we're doing this in the county, racial equity and social justice. Yeah, so it's a big deal. I mean, it's actually groundbreaking that, the county is not only moving in the direction of establishing policy in this area, but also legislation, right? So I thought we'd take the opportunity this session to really talk about how we see racial equity at the college. So in today's dialogue sessions, we're seeking proactive approaches to uplifting Montgomery College's welcoming community, but also to contribute to the county dialogue. So this session is really taken from some of the people probably in this room, I think, participated in sessions that the county has had. And we're going to upload our suggestions that we may have for the county into their portal, where they're taking suggestions and comments about racial equity and social justice initiatives. So following my presentation, Ms. C. Marie Taylor, who's the president and CEO of Leadership Montgomery, will discuss some key terms and give us some ground rules for our table discussions. Ms. Taylor's full bio can be found in the program that you received today. Is Ms. Taylor here yet? Let's see, I don't see her yet. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, I'll introduce her momentarily. So let's get right into it, starting with some slides in which I will describe a few key terms and their definitions so we can have a common understanding of what is meant by race, ethnicity, and equity. Are you advancing? Okay, thank you. So what is race? People often identify race by ancestry and physical features. Race presumes shared biological or genetic traits. In reality, race is a social rather than biological construct that was created to justify slavery, colonialism, and white supremacy. Scientific studies show that genetic differences are weak across population except for skin color. It is important to recognize, however, that although race is a social construct, over time, race has become an important part of many people's identities, creating solidarity and community. An ethnic group or ethnicity is a population group whose members identify with each other on the basis of common nationality or shared cultural traditions such as language and history. Members of the same ethnic group can have different racial backgrounds. Finally, equity refers to the fair distribution of resources and opportunities so that everyone can achieve success. Equity is not the same as equality because treating everyone the same to promote fairness only works if everyone begins at the same starting point. So as noted in this chart, racial disparities are pervasive across systems, characterizing most measures of well-being and risk in Montgomery County. These American Community Survey data points compiled by the Urban Institute show that despite relatively common levels of high school completion and employment by race and ethnicity, there are wide disparities in unemployment, income, home ownership, and poverty. The Government Alliance for Race and Equity, GARE, finds that racial disparities evident across measures are often explained by blaming individual people and promoting, quote unquote, hard work as the way to get ahead. GARE notes that while hard work can help, there are underlying systems that are the real force driving racial inequities. And GARE also encourages localities to focus on structural transformation to reduce racial disparities. Ms. C. Marie Taylor will talk to us a little bit more about those transformations and ways to combat those. So let's look a little bit at the metrics where Latino and Black residents have worse outcomes than white residents. And this is right here in our county. So in income and employment, in business, firm revenue, for example, economic security, poverty, foster care, lack of health insurance, in unaffordable rents and home ownership, and in high school, lack of high school degrees or more suspensions and dropouts. And then, of course, in criminal justice, in juvenile intake and arrest. Metrics where Black residents have worse outcomes than white and Latino residents include things like transportation. So, and not having vehicles to get back and forth. The feeling of connectedness, mobility and just moving here a year ago, for example. And then infant mortality and heart disease mortality, stroke mortality, and breast cancer mortality. And metrics where Latino residents whose have worse outcomes than white and Black residents, which is here on the slide that you see. Things like management occupations, so being at lower levels in terms of employment, for example, and lack of health insurance, again, is prevalent there. And metrics where Asian residents have worse outcomes than white residents in terms of business ownership, the amount of revenue that's generated from businesses, lack of, again, health care insurance, and overall poverty. And then metrics where Asian residents have better outcomes than white residents in terms of less arrest and less amount of Asians as opposed to white residents being in foster care. And so I want to talk a little bit about, in order to recognize racial inequity, it really is important. We've talked a lot about microaggressions, and Tim touched a little bit on bias, but understanding the differences between implicit and explicit bias, and knowing how implicit biases are replicated through collective decisions and actions within institutions. So as described in this chart, implicit bias refers to attitudes, thoughts, and feelings that exist outside of our conscious awareness or conscious control. And we talked a little bit about that earlier this morning. And in contrast, explicit bias is expressed directly and consciously. For instance, if you have a sign in an apartment building, we don't rent to fill in the blank. Other examples of implicit bias noticed by researchers include things like managers being less likely to call back or hire members of a different ethnic group, NBA referees being more likely to favor players with whom they share a racial identity, and teachers calling on boys more often than calling on girls. So implicit bias helps to explain how racial disparities can occur without intention or without malice. In institutions, the bias of individuals is routinely replicated through collective decisions and actions. And further, the impact of implicit bias often becomes compounded unless it is counteracted. Just like individuals and institutions can manifest racism, individuals and institutions can manifest racism and explicit bias as well. And this matrix here offers a visual reference for considering the distinction between implicit and explicit bias among individuals and institutions. It also offers some context as to why GARE encourages local governments to focus their efforts on institutional implicit bias. And that is really the hidden forces at work in our institution. And we talk about this morning about microaggressions and those little pinpoints, as Tim referred to, mosquito bites. And this is a similar type of reaction. So I'd like to take the time to invite Ms. C. Marie Taylor to the stage today. Her bio is in your program, but I would like to share some brief highlights of this exceptional woman who's going to lead our facilitation this afternoon. So Ms. Taylor became the president and CEO of Leadership Montgomery in September 2015. She's dedicated her life's work to supporting the community. For more than 20 years, she has worked in service organizations holding vital leadership positions within the Washington metropolitan area. Ms. Taylor, come on up. Move all my stuff.
We're just doing a little set change. How's everyone? You sure? All right, I know we're talking about racism, but we can be positive about it. We're going to fight it. Yes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pick up from where Sharon was. Thank you so much. So as she said, I'm C. Marie Taylor. I am the president and CEO of Leadership Montgomery, and I'm pleased to be here for part of your equity dialogue. I am going to talk to you briefly about Leadership Montgomery. I'm going to give you some other key terms, and then we're going to get right to our dialogue, because what's the most important part of this is you all speaking to each other. So I've had the privilege of leading many of these community conversations for the last 18 months, and so I'm excited about working with you all today. I'm going to talk to you briefly about Leadership Montgomery. I can figure out how to work the clicker. What do I have to click? Okay, thank you. All right. He's going to click for me. All right, so a little bit about Leadership Montgomery. So we have been advancing Montgomery County through a network of more than 2,500 individuals through the public, private, and nonprofit leaders who share the commitment to meaningful change for a thriving Montgomery County. So we're celebrating 30 years of excellence by educating, inspiring, convening, connecting leaders through programs that support hands-on curriculum and service-based programs. Our graduates, and I am a graduate, Dr. Pollard's a graduate, there are many Montgomery College graduates, I see Rose in the audience, come out of programs better connected to people, organizations, and volunteer opportunities through improved learning and understanding service and leaderships. And so Leadership Montgomery has gone through our own race equity transformation from when I took over the organization 4 years ago, and so we're a living testimony to the power of doing this work and staying committed to it, and we really feel that race equity is a leadership issue. And so because of that, we have changed our values as an organization to include action, integrity, diversity, engagement, inclusion, and growth. And so the two big ones are inclusion and growth, because a lot of times in this county, we talk about diversity and how diverse we are, but we don't talk about inclusion and we don't talk about growth. And so that is where the real work happens, in those two words, right? So we use those values to guide our work and how we address vital issues and timely matters and the leaders that face around the county, regardless of their political affiliation. So we've created two big bodies of work at Leadership Montgomery to manifest that. So we do 2-day workshops on race equity. They're pretty intense, and we run them every other month. And actually, in partnership with Montgomery County, just yesterday, we started a whole year-long program called REAL, which stands for Race, Equity, Action, and Leadership. And so in that program, for the course of about 9 months, institutions come together and they develop their own race equity plan for their institution. So our big first test case is Adventist Healthcare. So they have a bunch of their leadership from across the healthcare system that's participating in this program. And we're hoping to change the face of healthcare in Montgomery County through this race equity work. So we're really excited about this. And so that's just some context as to how we've been able to do this work and dive deep into it and how it can transform the way that we as an institution, Leadership Montgomery, actually work and can affect change here in Montgomery County. So in that regard, let's talk about some key terms that we're going to want to think about when we have our conversations this afternoon. If you'll go to the next slide, please. Oh, you're already there. That's magical. All right, so let's talk about the big elephant in the room, right? So racism, right? So let's let that sit for a second. So we hear it all the time. What's a simple definition for it? So I say racism is a math problem. It's where you take the social and institutional power and then you add in race prejudice, right? So it's really a system of oppression based on race, right? So that's a simple definition for a big elephant in the room. And then let's talk about a system. So what's a system? It's really a set of things that make something whole, right? So actually, the grocery store is a system, right? There are all these individual aisles. It just keeps working on itself. Montgomery College is a system, right? It's a normal way of things just keep going. It just runs itself, right? And then there's another big elephant in the room that you want to talk about, white supremacy, right? So I've taken these giant, heavy words and boiled them down to one sentences, right? So you can think about it in a quick, kind of meaningful way. And so when we talk about white supremacy, we say it's the idea that white people think that they're superior or better than people of color, that their actions and thoughts and beliefs are better than everybody else, right? And so that's a simple definition of white supremacy. And so these are some key terms we're going to think about this afternoon. And then let's go on to social and institutional power, right? So we're kind of building a layer. So when I think about social and institutional power, it really relates to the access to resources that one has, and it's the ability to influence over others, right? So you giving the opportunity to define someone's reality or their decisions. And then finally, oppression. So that's another big kind of loose term out in the universe. And so when we talk about oppression, we say it's really the ability to have power over someone where you can define their reality. And the definition of oppression actually has some deep layers. And so I'm going to kind of break those down into 4 different ways that they can show up. And so we have this big chart. And so I've taken some of the high points of them as some examples about how oppression can show up. And there are many ways that we actually don't even realize, and there's some big caveats to that. So let's talk a little bit about people of color and how they face internalized racial inferiority. And so many times as a person of color, sometimes we'll believe negative messages about ourselves, and we feel that we may have limited choices or a limited sense of possibility because of the oppression that's placed upon us, right? And so that leaves us into the next caveat, which is constructed racism oppression. And so often in that system, that's where historically we believe there's been some systematic racism that affects our personal lives, the institutions that we belong to and even work in, or our cultural life, and that's part of our constructed racism, right? Going back to those big definitions. And so if you continue to dive deeper into this model, there is internalized racial superiority, right? This goes back to this whole white supremacy, and where we think that there is some internalized superiority over other people, where my views as a white person is standard and normal, and we should all think this way, right? And we think that we have the right to think this way, and if you're uncomfortable, it's really not my problem. It's not my fault. And that materializes often into white privilege, which gives white folks and white people the ability to just kind of walk around life where they feel validated all the time and where they know that racism may exist, but it's really not my problem to deal with it. And as a default, I don't have to think about it, right? So those are 4 big catalogs of how oppression can show up and affects us, whether we think about it a lot, and it's internal and it shows up externally. And so we want to give you these big caveats to think about that. Because in these examples, these are some key terms that you want to think about when having your conversations this afternoon, when we're talking about race equity, and perhaps there are things in the community that we can change if we think about these big buckets and show how we can move them forward. And so there's some best practices to advancing race equity. And so I've taken a big, huge topic and broken it down to 3 small pieces, right? And so the first thing is normalizing conversations around race equity, and that's what we're gonna do today, right? So if you notice how easily I was able to say white supremacy, racism, oppression, right? Because I have normalized those words in my vocabulary, and I am trying to make people feel comfortable about talking about them, right? So when we normalize those conversations, it's easier to dissect them and actually talk about them. And then when you organize around that, so this is a big organization around that, right? We're gonna actually talk about that. We're organizing this group to talk about these tough issues, and then hopefully that's gonna lead to operationalizing that, right? So you have some conversations, you come up with some really good ideas, and then you put them into practice, right? So those are 3 simple steps to actually tackle a big, huge problem. But if you break them down, it's actually can be done, and that's what we did at Leadership Montgomery. We started with each of these steps, and we continue, right? It's a cycle. You keep going through it. But if you think about those 3 steps in that kind of matter, and in the last one, you develop some tools. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is actually through this normalization of conversations, come up with some tools that's going to help us organize and actually operationalize what race equity looks like here at the college. And to do that, you have to have some courageous conversations, right? So talking about race and racism is difficult. It's triggering, it's hard. We're at different places, we come from different experiences. And so what we always want to do, I say, when we talk about tough topics like racism and oppression and white supremacy, is there's something called the compass, the courageous compass. And so in that compass, when I'm talking about something that's really important to me, I can be in one area and someone else could be in a different area. So if you look at this giant chart, right? So if I'm talking about something that is really important to me, I could be in a zone where I really believe this issue, right? And I'm coming from my beliefs and my morals, where someone else might be in the reaction, like, that's bad, we're gonna fix it, let's fix that right now, right? But I'm not there yet, because right now I'm talking about how I feel about it, my beliefs and morals, right? And someone else may be thinking, well, I'm just gonna ruminate on that. That's interesting, let me cogitate on that. I'm at a college, I gotta think through this issue. But the other person who's in the same conversation may be in their emotions about that. It was really hurtful, this is how I feel, right? And so it's really important when you go into these conversations that you think about, where am I in my compass, right? Am I in my believing place? Do I believe this is wrong? Do I feel like this is a moral obligation? Is my colleague just ruminating about this, thinking, well, this doesn't affect me, but I see what their point is, right? So there are different places, and you're gonna be in a different sense of urgency based on where you are in this compass. Does this make sense for people? I see people nodding their heads. Yes? Do you need more examples? No? All right, good, because I'm staying on task, because I'm standing between you and getting some food. So, you know, I talk quick but with impact. So this is really important, and we'll remind you of this. I'll walk around to the tables when we actually get into the breakout groups to think about the compass. It helps for a better conversation when you check yourself and figure out, well, where am I and where is the person who's speaking? And it helps you to listen better when you think about that. So let's talk about some of the ground rules we're going to use when we're having our courageous conversations. So these are really, really important, and I wish that people would use them when they're having facilitated conversations and in life, right? So they seem pretty simple, and they actually are if you follow them. So the first one is you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And so if you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, you want to use them in proportion, right? So think about the math of that, right? All right, and this is one of my favorite ones that I use a lot. So talk as if you're right, but listen as if you're wrong. So let me explain that. So if I talk as if I'm right, I'm gonna give my point, I'm gonna make it, and I'm gonna be quiet, right? Because I'm gonna use my 2 ears and my 1 mouth. I'm gonna speak quickly and with impact, but then I'm gonna listen as if I'm wrong. And so let me unpack that for you. When you listen as if you're wrong, you're listening to see what the other person is saying, and you're listening all the way to the end of their sentence before you come back with your statement. Right? So it's really hard for people to listen to the end of a sentence. But if you listen as if you're wrong, you'll listen to the end of the sentence. Does that make sense for folks? That one's really key. All right, so here's one of my other favorite ones. Search for the humanity in someone where they're speaking. We all have different lived experiences, right? And you may feel one way, and someone may feel a different way. But if we can search for the humanity and the person that's speaking, it's easier to hear and appreciate what they're talking about, right? And then another one is speak from your own existence. So I'm going to speak from my existence as a black woman in Montgomery County. I'm not going to speak as a white woman in Montgomery County because I'm not, right? So I'm going to use I statements. Here's how I feel. Here was my example, right, as someone who's X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to use some I statements. I'm also going to respect the group. So just because I've had some terrible issue around this one thing doesn't mean someone else hasn't, right? And maybe I feel about a 10 on this issue, but someone feels a 2. So I'm going to respect the group and where they are so that we can facilitate the conversation. The other one is we're going to listen to learn. And so as people are speaking, what can you learn from what they're talking about? How can I lean into something that's really uncomfortable that they're talking about? So something they may bring up may be really uncomfortable for you, but can you lean into that? Because that's really where the beauty and the growth comes, is when you lean into that discomfort. And then finally, I leave this as the last one, be aware of your impact. Because this is tough stuff. And so we don't want you to censor yourself. I just want you to be aware of your impact. Look at the body language as people are speaking, right? And so think about that as you're talking with your colleagues. Can everyone agree to those ground rules? Can I have a verbal yes? All right, if you have a no, come see me. Are there any other ground rules that we want to add? I always ask that question.
So I'm really pleased that the students, various students are joining us today, but I have noticed in the past in these sort of setups with employees and students that there's sometimes what's the word I'm looking for?
Power dynamic?
Oh, thank you all so much. And now I'm thrown, sorry guys, 2 seconds. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Tori has put her finger on it. There's an inclination for students to overtalk, staff to overtalk students, but also to have this attitude of trying to teach the students something. And because we're used to that, that's usually the relationship that we're in. So I would like to suggest that we be really mindful of seeing them as peers in this conversation. I think I'm done.
Okay, so I think that's a great one. I'm going to write it on this clipboard after I find a marker. So we're going to see each other as peers, right? Can we agree to that one? So I think that's a great one, and I think, do we have our hand raised right here, ma'am? Oh, okay. I think that, I hate microphones. So I think that's a great one. So one of the things we want to talk about. Oh, thank God. Oh, God. Yeah, we're going to see each other as peers. I needed this 20 minutes ago. All right. So I think that's a great one. We're going to see each other as peers. And remember on those ground rules I said, search for the humanity in the person speaking? So that's another great, that's a tie-in to that, right? And we're going to think about the power dynamics of students versus professors versus administration versus all of those things. Right? And you're going to leave that right here next to my shiny shoes because nobody cares right now. We are all equal. We all have something important to share. And I have found that many times that when I listen with my 2 ears and my 1 mouth to the end of a sentence, that is where I hear the most important things, right? And so we're going to remember that and remember that we're actually talking about equity. And since in terms of equity, we are equal in times and space. And we're going to be equal in sharing and listening. All right, so I love that. Any other ones? These are really great.
And can we also just be mindful of, like, if someone shares something they may not want to be, widely shared without? So Vegas rules, if we can.
So that's a great one. So we use that a lot. So whatever is shared is going to stay in that circle. So we're gonna commit to creating a safe space within the circles, and even when we come back to do the report outs. Can we all agree to that? So if I, in my group, talk about how equity affects recycling, and I hate recycling because it bothers me down, we're gonna respect that. It's a ridiculous example I like to give, but we're gonna respect the statements that people give. Does that make sense? Can we agree to that? Yes? Okay. Other ones? Nope. Okay, so let me give you the breakdown as to what's gonna happen. All right, so we're gonna break for lunch. You're gonna grab your actual lunch, and then you're gonna go to your tables, and I think you're assigned. Hold on. Logistics is not my jam.
Right. Students first, because you will select your table. All right, and we're going to start with the room that's enclosed, and then we'll go to the tables out in front. Okay? You guys got that?
All right, so you're gonna go, so the students are gonna grab their lunch, not yet, hold on one second, and then you're gonna go, we're gonna start with the room that's enclosed, and then the overflow is gonna be out in the hallway. But we're gonna fill up all of the tables. That's my rule, fill up the tables, and don't sit with the 6 people that you know, right? You've gotta sit with somebody new. So take one friend with you, and then break up. Just one. So if there's like 6 of you, rock, paper, scissors it, I don't know. All right, so you're gonna grab your lunch, and then you're gonna come back to your tables. We're gonna be in our conversations from 11:45 to 1:15. But we've gotta be back in this room. Actually, I'm gonna say 1:10, back in this room. So, but here's the key things that's gonna happen at the tables. So at the tables, we're gonna have a note taker, and someone's gonna be responsible for reporting out. It can be the same person, but just know that someone's taking some notes, right? And someone's gonna report back out, because when we're gonna come back as a group, and we're gonna do report outs from each table as time permits. So that's really key. So once we get to the table, I believe that we have designated facilitators that are happening.
We do, and we need 5 minutes to get lunch out.
Okay.
So let's chat.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay, great. Then I'll keep talking. I love a mic. It's fine. All right. I'll go really slow with my notes. That's okay. You know what? I actually know what we can do. All right. So I haven't gone over the questions yet. And then we're going to do report outs here, and then we're going to wrap up adjourn. So let me go over the questions. So, and what we can do in the time that we actually have while they're getting lunch ready is you can start to take some notes that you want to jot down to get yourself prepared. Oh, I didn't know this was here. Oh, come on. Look, my slides are right there. I can run a little nonprofit. We don't have this fancy stuff. That's amazing. I had whiplash. All right. All right. Well, there you go. All right, I'll know for next time. All right, so let's talk about the questions. All right, so the first question that we have is we're going to share a story about how you or members of your family or community have been impacted by race, ethnicity, inequalities in your daily life. So you're going to talk about some personal stories about how race equity has affected you, right? And so that's where really these Vegas rules are going to be important here. And I want you to be courageous and actually share some stories, because that's how we're going to grow, and it's going to validate the work that we want to use, right? So try to lean into your discomfort and share some good stories that would be helpful. And it also is going to warm and shape the rest of the questions that we're going to ask. So the second one is, in what ways do race equity and social justice matter to you? So this is personal. How does it affect you? How does it affect your school, your community, your parents, what you want to do in life, how you're able to do it? We want to talk about, this is your chance to talk about how it personally affects you. And then the last question is, what do you see as opportunities for achieving greater race equity and social justice at Montgomery College, right? So remember I talked about the system, right? So Montgomery College is a system. And this is an opportunity for you to affect some of the change of how the system is working here. So we're going to actually ask you for strategies and changes or tools that you want to see here at Montgomery College. And so that's why we've given you the longest amount of time for this last question, because the college is going to take this information back to help shape their race equity work. So we've been doing this all around the county and for institutions, and it's been really helpful in terms of how they've shaped the work they're gonna do. So this is your chance to say, you know what, this is some of the things I wanna see on campus. I want new signs. I want more bilingual X, Y, and Z. I want more brown teachers teaching math, right? I'm giving you examples that I wish that I had when I was in college, right? So I want, I'll stop there. But this is your, because I have a long list of things that I want, but that's not my role here as a facilitator. All right, so I'll come give them to you. So those are the 3 questions. And so we're gonna come around and kind of time, pick someone in your group who loves to keep track of time, because we wanna make sure that we actually get through those 3 questions and that we've got good notes to come back to, and that someone's carefully taking the notes, because we're gonna give them back to the college. Does anyone have any questions about the actual questions that we're asking? My only request is try to stay on topic within these 3 questions. Any questions around that? Yes, and there'll be copies of the questions on your table. So the 3 questions are, please share a story about how you or your members of family or your community have been impacted by race equity. And then what are the ways that race equity and social justice matter to you? And then the last big question is, what do you see as some of the opportunities for race equity and social justice change here at the college, right? And so those are the 3 big questions, but they'll be on your table. So we're really trying to start with what's personal to you, what's affecting your community, and how we want that to show up at Montgomery College. So think of it as a continuum, right? And they're gonna use all of these tools to shape the race equity plan here at the college and report back to you. All right, and so what's happening when we come back this afternoon is we're gonna do report outs from each of the groups. So we're gonna try to take some highlights, and I'll facilitate how we'll do that, but that way we can learn from each other, because there might be some great things that are shared from the different groups that we're gonna share with each other, because these are things that you can also use in your community, right? So can you use this at your church, at your synagogue, at your house, frankly? Sometimes there's some equity issues within your household, right? So seriously, some of these tools we actually use, I use everywhere. So these are great learning opportunities. Leadership Montgomery is all about building communities, conversation by conversation, and so I applaud you for even taking that first step to have some conversations. I hope you leaned in, I hope you shared. If you didn't, shame on you, you missed the opportunity, but I'm gonna give you the opportunity in the future. So we have 15 groups and 30 minutes. That means you have 2 minutes. And I am a polite person until you run over time. Okay, so we have a volunteer from the first group. So what's gonna do, Jason and Poonam, where are you? My 2, all right. So Jason, this lovely lady's gonna go here first. What's gonna happen is this group is gonna be the perfect example. They're going to give their highlights of what they wanna, what they've talked about in 2 minutes or less. You're gonna say your name and you're gonna give your points. All right, and we're gonna give her undivided attention. We're gonna use our 2 ears and no mouth.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Sorry. Hi, everybody. This is Yuna, and I'm a student here. And then I'm very glad my professor, Professor Parker, and ASFO here. And thank you for the great opportunity. And also my group give this chance to me to speak us, represent all of us. Thank you. So I will do it right now. Here? Okay. So for the first question is share the story about the member of family or community have been impacted by the race and ethnicity. Sorry, this is question 1. Okay. Okay. So we're talking about the stereotype. And for another people don't learn from the stereotype how the racist via media and then the movies, and how also the racist within still exists is damaging. For the community, how we can do our kindness and show our kindness and friendness, and more importantly, big smiling towards the people, and that will have good impact to the community or to the people. And for the second question is, in which ways racial equality and social justice matter to you, is because the atmosphere is toxic for most people, and so we need to change that atmosphere when the conversation or the group. And also for, and the parenting, we talk about the parent in the home, how they can influence us, impact us for how we see the problem. And then we just need to stop the stereotype, and also, do the education, and then to be one group of us thought the impact for her is she wants to be considered as an individual, not as her background or race, or to see her and stop labeling. Okay, sorry. The last question is to the strategy or the choose suggestion for the school or the community is I think the universal design for the learning, so provide the student and the equity is equal opportunity to learn and see individually, like someone like me have a disability to read in English, and so give him more time. And so every student individually can develop in the same speed, and also the open education resource for the free book students. We love it because maybe the financial pressure for the student could make them not concentrating with what they actually learn, and I think that's helped a lot. And also the global education, the online course like a Coursera, and so people can have access to the higher education learning. So in that way, we can learn more and interact to each other, and then get a more better image for all the races. And also the cultural responsible technique, coordinability responsible. Also, we need a self-awareness to know when we're teaching people, when we're talking people, is we need to concentrating that we're not perfect, and everyone is not perfect, and also we're all just a human, and treat us just when we teach or when we talk. And then the more equity training, make it become required. That's it. Thank you very much.
All right, good job. Excellent.
Great job. Thank you so much.
All right, group number 2. I'm doing some summaries of yours. All right, who's group number 2? Well, I didn't give you a group number.
Numbers on your tables.
Here's your, we'll just go right here. Go with this group right here. Let's not confuse people. My timer's starting. This is the next group right here. You're next. All right, here we go, sir. What's your name?
I'm speaking, so I'm Milton Nash. And
Come on up.
Will be speaking for table number 2. And I'm focusing my remarks on the third question.
Okay.
So opportunities for achieving greater racial equity at Montgomery College. And the discussion at our table really focused on perceived inequities between campuses. I mean, this was interesting. So perceived differences in the resources available to campuses, perceived differences in the quality of courses depending on where they're taught, right? And so at one point during our discussion, so someone expressed the idea that Takoma Park has a reputation as a, quote, ghetto campus, that this is a perception among students, and this is a perception which they think is shared by maybe possibly even some in the administration. And again, I'm going to use the word perception, but that's important, right? When people have that perception, that impacts their idea of themselves, right, as learners. That impacts their idea of themselves as, their idea of their potential, the idea of their worth. And I think it's time that we have an honest and open conversation about this perception in the college.
All right, so what are your strategies?
What are the strategies?
What are your strategies? I need some actions.
So one idea that was suggested was that we have a forum available for students and others who feel this way, that they've had a different experience based on campus. So
the common student experience.
It has to begin with just being honest about it and being open, right? I think that's important. And so I think this is a topic because I'm at Germantown now, but I was at Takoma Park for most of my career here. And I'm going to tell you, this is real, right? That perception of inequality is a real one, right?
All right.
And I think it impacts students, and I think it impacts employees.
All right.
Wow.
Thank you. All right, group number 3. All right.
Do you want me to come up on stage? Or
Sure.
Okay. Hey,
Live your best life.
y'all.
Ramon de la Cruz, can you come to the stage, please?
So my name's Elizabeth Schlackman. I work in the library. Come on down, borrow a book. If you know me, I say that every time I get in front of a group. Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Look at there, I'm full service.
So, group number 7 representing, it's a beautiful prime number. We have 2 major talking points and ways to develop the college and improve in this area. First of all is talking about hiring committees, that one, it should be a diverse search committee, diverse experience, racial, etc. But we're also looking for candidates who are diverse and trying to figure out how to attract a diverse candidate pool. And I don't need to go into strategies for that because there's like books written on that stuff. But not only that they are diverse in themselves, but that every candidate that we consider seriously for position demonstrates success working with diverse populations. So that they're not just diverse in themselves, but have worked with diverse populations. And then the final point is that really putting structures in place to help us seriously consider the differences that others experience and or that are outside of our own personal experiences. And as a practical way of doing that is putting in place checklists. Health Sciences loves their checklists. It keeps people alive. But we want to checklist against biases. So everything for race, gender, sorry, I'm blanking on all the, they're right there, sorry. Size, back me up, short people, size. The name you have, the name your parents gave you, the name you've chosen for yourself, even your handedness. Whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, your culture, and your gender. Okay, peace out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good job. All right. Who's got the all right, we have our next group. All right. I'm trying to take some notes from the last one.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jeanette, and I was part of the amazing group number 3. And so one of the questions that came up was, why aren't there more people here? The college is so huge, and there's just, 100 of us here? So how do we get this message out to everyone? So we were thinking it needs to be more of a process that begins onboarding. When someone is even thinking of getting a job with MC, we ask them the question, what does equity and inclusion mean to you? And people are pretty honest sometimes, so if it doesn't mean anything to them, then we need to think about, okay, do we want them in our community? So we thought about making it more of a process, so asking the college to vote on maybe a movie that we could watch together and discuss, a book, having just discussions in our team. So just making it a year-round process rather than just like an event here or a mandatory training there. Am I missing anything? Group 3? Okay. Thank you.
Excellent. You got 30 seconds back. All right. Amazing. All right, who's next? The pressure's on you. Come on up. We want to see your beautiful face.
While you're coming up, would you all please take out your evaluation forms and fill them out for us? Thank you so much. If you don't have any, Ramon will get you some.
Yeah, come on up to the stage so they can see you. But let's give her our full attention. All right, there we go. Let's clap.
Thank you.
we had a very unique and interesting experience. As we started like you guys, we were very diverse. Nobody knew each other. So we started talking about, after we introduced each other, what are we going to ask, what do we need? And we all had different things we wanted to contribute. Some of the main ones that we wanted to contribute was such as having diverse service workers, instructors like the person mentioned here, cultural training to teachers, to counselors. We were all agreeing on that. And somebody also mentioned on major holidays of different international, different cultures, we should not have major programs because, would disenfranchise the other ones. We also talked about more opportunities for temp workers. We were talking about that and we were having a great experience. And we had a student worker amongst us. She was very polite. She also told us about her own experience, but some of us around the table continued to ask her, what is your issue? We want to hear about your issue. Please tell us about your issue. At first, she just said this is, but then somebody continued to ask her, what is your experience? And then all of a sudden, and I have her permission to share with you guys, the student became emotional. She started crying. I'm talking today. And then she said, I worry about what to pay for my college. I worry about what to eat. That's what she told us. And everybody broke down crying because she is coming to college, in Montgomery College, worrying about what to eat. And this is the thing that we are blind about. I work in community engagement. I see this every day. We do not give resources to our students. We do not give community resources to our students. We just expect them to come to school, go to school, pay your money, but we don't give them access to how to make it in school. So it's a lose-lose situation. They drop out of school, their life is messed up, and our life is messed up here at MC because we are losing a lot of students. We should not think like a business, come get your money and let me teach you and go home. We should think holistically, how can I contribute to the well-being of the student? When we as a college do this intentional effort, the student would want to stay. The student would want to stay. And we were just discussing, it can be simple as producing different flyers in different language that show about community resources, such as Mana Food. Do we do that as a college? Such as health care. Where do you get health care? Mobile meds. Where do you go if something emergency happens? If you need a child care, where do you go? Of course, we can put it in a banner somewhere in a language they don't understand and somewhere where they don't access. Do we make intentional effort to reach people who have different culture, who are disenfranchised, who are marginalized? Do we as a college make intentional effort to show them that we care for them? Because caring is not just saying, I love you, come, and giving them that big hug with that big bear. It's really showing them that we really care for them. And this was a real experience for us. And that's what I wanted to share with you guys. And I see it every day because I am a community engagement worker. And that's what I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was excellent. And thank you to that student that really shared and leaned out there. That's really, really helpful. All right, we're going to have our next group come up. You guys have some great lists. I'm trying to give some highlight captures, but I'm loving all the things that I'm hearing. And I think there's some practical things that the college can do. Hi.
All right, so Tori, we were group 12, thank you. And we came up with a number of different ideas, which we brainstormed here. In the interest of time, however, I'm gonna focus on the core ones that we pulled out. So we came up with the idea of providing EEO data by department to department heads, to chairs, to deans, so that they can really identify trends in hiring, transfers, offers for promotion, training, that kind of thing. So it's an access and resource issue. For chairs, deans, senior directors, VPs, et cetera, to have scheduled office hours. So essentially opening up their office to create a safe space for people to come and have conversations with them. 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever that looks like, so that folks can come and express their concerns that they have around equity and inclusion. And then leadership leads at all levels.
We talked about the idea of having, help me out, strategized equity resources for leaders to really excel at creating the safe space at any level that they're leading. So from program manager to program director, VP, chair, dean, and above. Did I get them all? I got them all. So there we go. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, who's our next group?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so I'm part of group number 3, and in the interest of time, I'm only gonna focus, and the other prime number, group number 5. So in the interest of time, we're just gonna focus on our goals for group, the 3rd question. And what we said is that we wanna develop a college-wide inclusive implicit bias training program designed for 3, I'll start again.
You have to hold it like this.
So what we had is that we wanna develop a college-wide inclusive implicit bias training program designed for 3 different audiences. So to focus on faculty, staff, and students. And this is because MC is such a diverse campus. We are such a diverse community. Different people come from different experiences. We have different cultures and backgrounds. So it's important that students be able to communicate to students properly and that staff and faculty able to communicate too. Because we used an example of eye contact per se. Eye contact means different things in different communities. So the way people may perceive it may be different, so it's important we bridge the gap in that way. So this will curate an environment where students feel safe to talk to faculty and staff also. And what this will do is it will create a safe and trusting community for everyone. And the key stakeholders in this we're thinking about ELITE. That's a development program anyway, so ELITE take charge in this. But also having a diverse community to advise ELITE in designing these 3 training programs. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, here's our next group. Group number 1. Or let's applaud for him as he comes down. Yeah, can someone from his group come up and help him? Let's, as a community, let's help each other.
Nice that you're holding it. Thank you. Yeah, we are group number 1. We had a... And who are you? And I'm Richard, and I'm training and development coordinator with ELITE. Thanks for the opportunity for everybody who made this happen today and to be a part of it. We had really interesting conversation in our first 2 questions. The stories were personal, and information came out that started to tie with the second question. So when it came to the second question, we were thinking out loud, and we decided we better record these and report them. The thing that we had in common with the, why does racial equity and social justice matter? We kept going back to the issue of rights, opportunities, and standards. And our group is coming from a very diverse background, and we come here at this place, and we still experience things that surprise us. So we thought, well, areas of work, treating people with respect, safe environments, etc., were really important. We also thought that we have a lot of great things going on here. And we need to recognize where we've come from just 20, 15 years ago. At that moment, Sharon came to our table, shared some ideas about number 3, and then our student here comes and says, take a look at what we have right in front of us. A professional black woman leading in an area. Who would have thought about this 10 years ago? So we went, yeah, we have to recognize the past. We can be focused too much on the present. And then Sharon's idea as well, which we were thinking about, was dialoguing across and between generations. So that's the future. So we think it's quite important to tie the past with our present and the future. And that led to our recommendation, which we filled out in the form as we were supposed to do. And not to get too detailed about that, but it came out that we should have a type of committee made up of experts, not just interested people, but experts in areas of social justice and racial equity, and who can contribute in an honest, let's say arm's distance length to the college even, but are representative of the community from which we all come from, and who can report back. And report back, here's where our stakeholders are important. Top of the house, yeah, top of the house, which includes our president who is here today, but as well as the senior people around her. Taking it down further, when it comes to milestones, what would it look like? Have that committee in place, have a reporting out, and then have actual actions that are going to be followed up on. The last bit there is actually going down, again, reading into what Sharon expressed with us today, for behavior change, right down to performance management. You know, seeing the behaviors implemented that way, equally, both from a leadership, senior level, right on down the ranks. That's what we came up with.
All right, thank you. I love the drill down. All right, where's our next group? Okay, right here.
Just in terms of timing, how many groups, oh, sorry. How many groups do we have?
I think we have 4 left. So I think we're doing good.
Yeah, we were table 8, and during our discussion, we discovered that nothing promotes and advances racial equality and social justice more than another PowerPoint presentation. So we decided to go a different route in terms of question number 3. In terms of our idea is eat, listen, and dance. We want to have a simultaneous all-location day that happens at all 3 campuses, all locations, in which we take a day off. You report to work as usual, but instead of that, you have an opportunity to eat, to dance, to listen to other music, to just have fellowship and have fun. And what this would take would be, you know, a massive amount of effort, but what it would take really at the end of the day is commitment from the college and everyone here to empower those to attend and participate equitably and to have fun. So we need to seriously think about this rather than have a day in which we're all sitting in a meeting, which as exciting as they are, we can do better. And so have a day of just fun, because the feeling in our group was that you get to know each other and break down barriers if you're relaxed, if you're having fun, if you're breaking bread, if you're dancing, if you're moving, if you're just outside of yourself. So that was our idea.
All right, thank you. All right, next group. All right, raise your hand if you still have to speak, so I can take a count. I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I was off by 1. All right, we can do it. We can do it.
Hello, hello. My name is Emmanuel. So I was part of Group 6, and we decided that to help for greater opportunity, we would try to make gender-neutral bathrooms, so that way people from other genders can be accepting, and also makes everybody feel more of community, and also strip any factors in job applications using blind auditions. So example, no name, like no gender, no like ethnicity, none of that. So just go in there blank, so they don't know. All they know is just your credentials, what you've done, what you've been able to do. And that way they don't judge you from like, oh, so this person is this race or this gender, and then they just discriminate you because they might have come from another environment.
Oh, excellent. All right. Thank you. All right. Next group.
I'll start talking as I'm walking down.
All right, I love that.
I'm Carlo from Lucky Group 13 here. The best prime number, am I right? All right. So we decided to tackle 2 issues, and they're really around hiring. One is we want to have faculty and staff that are reflective of the student population, so we want to look at diverse recruitment areas. We've got a lot of great HBCUs in the area. We should really be targeting them to make sure that we're recruiting from them so that students actually see faculty and staff that are reflective of their own backgrounds and their identity. And the second thing was, I'm going to talk about something that was important in our table, and there is a little bit of a class system that operates in the college, and there are faculty, there are academic support staff, and then there are regular support staff, like our public safety and facilities folks. And folks in regular support staff find it difficult at times to move up into other positions, and they get kind of stuck in these areas. And even as internal applicants, there are times that we won't get interviews for jobs, even though we meet all the minimum requirements. And so we want to make sure that the search committees, one, that whatever the rules are with internal candidates are being shared with everyone, so everyone knows what the rules are. If I'm not guaranteed an interview, then let me know so I don't have that expectation. The second thing is giving me shadowing opportunities, right? A lot of folks in facilities and those other support positions, they take the jobs because they want to go to school and get tuition help. And then you earn your degree and you're kind of stuck in the job because there's nothing at the college where you can really move up to. So we want to give folks shadowing opportunities. We want to make sure that we're clarifying the policies around internal applicants for employees, sharing the job announcements in an email like we do with all the stuff on CPOD. They send an email out every week or every 2 weeks that says, here's all the classes that are available. Just send out an email that says, here's all the jobs that are currently open at the college so that everyone knows. And maybe your dream job just came open and that's the opportunity. But unless you're going in and actually checking the job posting, you're not going to know that that job came open. And then finally, making sure there's feedback for internal candidates so that they know what they can improve on so that maybe the next time they'll be better at it. And also then making sure that we're auditing the work of search committees to ensure that the rules are being followed and updating anything that needs to be updated. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you. All right, let's get this group over here. Come on down. Oh, we got a lady over here. All right, fantastic.
Okay,
come right to the middle. We want to see your face.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Kimberly. We were group number 10, so we were in the double digits. Just to follow up with group number 13, actually, we did also talk about hiring, specifically about internal candidates, so overhauling, the system. So all the points that you bring up, that's what we would hope to happen. Also, more transparency about the hiring and vetting and appointing of staff, faculty, and administrators, especially among middle management. Also, we talked about more consistent communication between academic and the central services middle management that is then shared with the general staff and faculty, making sure it's consistent. And lastly, this was also shared already, but about equal and consistent distribution of resources for staff on all of the campuses, such as offerings of the wellness program, of facilities such as gyms and meditation spaces, and also dedication of spaces specifically for staff. So making sure there's a staff or faculty lounge on all campuses that all staff can appreciate and enjoy.
You got some claps for that last one. Let's get some equal distribution going. Get some snaps for that. All right. I think we're narrowing it down. I think we have 2 left, right? We have this group and this group. Oh, we have 3. Okay, so you, and then you. And you. Okay. How come these hands are now just popping up? I didn't see you before.
Yes, hello, everybody. So in our group, we talked about some of the experiences that people face, like racially, some of the racial injustices. And what came up was with the names. Most people feel like when they come here to America, like they have to change their last names. And like, for example, like when the Muslim slogan came about, like Muslims to go back to where they came from. So for me, coming from a family where I'm a Muslim, my mom told me, like, if you go to America, oh, your name being a Muslim, that's going to be a big problem. So that kind of like made me step back and think twice. And so like me hearing from other people sharing their ideas meant that I wasn't the only person that was in this kind of boat, feeling this kind of way, though I was already aware. But yeah, that brought it to my attention. And also like diversity and inclusion helps people build towards a more comprehensive goal where people feel free to share ideas instead of keeping their rich wisdom in their shell. Because knowledge not shared is wasted. That's what we believe so. And also on advocating on behalf of like F1 students, those are international students. When it comes to job employment opportunities, it seems like there isn't that much because like most of it goes to like people who have federal aid or like kind of like help. And because it's the federation that's gonna pay for your salary. But if you're an F1 student, then that means you're gonna have less opportunities, close to thin. So I believe there should be more policies or like more opportunities in terms of like internship, basically opportunities. And we came up with a chart where we talked about creating more awareness to all students. So when students come to this institution, they should feel welcome. Be it you're undocumented, you all have the right to education. No one should deny the right to education. Because everybody, if we have an educated society, that's what's going to propel us to be knowledgeable and be able to share ideas and move towards a positive state. And we talked about the peer-to-peer program. The peer-to-peer program we feel is a very good strategy because here it's peers educating fellow peers. Your fellow peers will feel comfortable sharing ideas with you in a certain setting whereby you're sharing different ideas. And we talked about like events and activities, like for example, mental health, human trafficking, healthy sexual relations, and the Title IX. Here you can be able to lay information to fellow students where they'll be able to give you feedback. Unlike when it comes to talking to a fellow administrator, they'll be trying to hold back. So we feel that's also very important. And my friend also has something to say.
One thing this gentleman said about club hours is like one day or maybe 2 days in a week where we have no class, nothing going on, but just creating events and activities for students to go to these events so they won't have any excuses about going to class or have a meeting. So one day where we can all gather together like this to talk about important informations like related to like awareness or job opportunities for students, so they can all come together to understand that we have these resources in our campus and they are prone to like use these resources. One thing we also talk about is new students, like before going into starting a new semester, we should come to these students, know that these resources are open to students and that they shouldn't be afraid to use these resources, and they should come and be able to understand firsthand, not like in between semesters where they can come to students and not know about these resources so they won't be lost, and that we're there to like show them that these resources are for them to use it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the co-presentation. Thank you.
Now, Marie, we have these, people are giving their Post-its to somebody. How's that
Yes,
work?
so what we're going to do at the end is everyone's going to bring their Post-its right here to the front of this stage. Actually, you can leave your Post-its right here because we're going to collect them all to go back to the college. And what I'm going to do is, these are the summary notes I'm going to leave for you all.
Thank you.
All right, take it away.
Hello, I'm Diana Benson. I'm from the TRIO program. Raise your hand if you know there are some wonderful things going on here at Montgomery College. Raise your hand if you think there's some not so wonderful things happening here at MC. So that's what we discussed in Group 11, and we talked about the way to make change would be to focus on policy and to spend a little bit less time about our concerns about the college, but really trying to figure out ways that we can inform and change some policies here at MC. The other thing that we talked about was that we wanted equity and inclusion to be more theme-based each semester or each year, so that we could feel like we're crossing some things off the list and not just continuing to add to the list. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm representing Group 9.
I like the love. I like the love.
A great group. We actually went over a lot of things and figured out that we are actually doing a lot of good things. So we talked about the onboarding process and the restructuring of the onboarding process and the language line and offering English as a second language classes and things like that. So it was sort of affirming, I feel, to be glad that we are moving. We're moving in a good direction. So our recommendation for number 3 was to further promote the Voyance language line. So I don't know if any of you have heard about this, and if you haven't, this is the opportunity for you to use it. It is sort of like if you had gone to a doctor's office and you spoke a different language. They may have a list of the languages on the wall, and they can call and translate for you. So we have this, and it is an opportunity that I think has not been real widely shared. I don't think students know about it. It's not real, advertised. So we want to promote that and really be welcoming and inclusive to all of our families and our community members and our students, our new students, as they come to onboard here. So hopefully we will be able to get that out and share that more widely.
All right, thank you. All right. Do we have one last group? Oh, Sharon, I told you. Look, it's 1:58.
Oh, okay.
Look at that.
Was that
it? All right. So I was going to go through the high points, but we don't have time, but I'm going to make sure the college gets them. So I want you all to give yourself a round of applause. And so my request that I have of you is that the conversations you had here, take them outside of this room and have them with someone else. So that's how you continue to build a community, and that's how you continue to foster dialogue around equity. And so until we continue to have these courageous conversations and actually speak up and ask for what we want, we're going to continue to have kind of this circle. So we want to keep pushing forward and holding each other accountable. And so I'll make sure that this information gets to the college, and we're standing ready to help in this work. And I thank you so much for the opportunity to, the chance to spend the afternoon with you all. This is my favorite thing. So thank you, and hopefully I'll see you again. All right, I'm turning back to Sharon.
No mic? Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I heard that part. All right. Is that better? Okay. So I just want to thank you all for your time and energy today. I also would like you to please complete the evaluation that are in your packets. If you don't have them, please see Mrs. Apala. Mrs. Apala, would you raise your hand? And she will get one to you. And we'll also send it out electronically. But I want to give a round of applause to the planning committee. This could not have been done without them, so thank you all so much. As a follow-up to today's conversations, you'll be receiving an email with the summation of today's events, some strategies for success, some additional reference materials and tools you can use in your classrooms and your offices. And so please do definitely join us for the town hall forums, where you can discuss and share your thoughts about equity and inclusion. And many of you have seen the cycle of change that was up on posters. So the next one will be on Monday, October 21st, from 2 to 4 at Germantown. And of course, with each one of the town hall forums, there is a pizza for your thoughts. So Pizza for Your Thoughts is from 11:30 to 1:30 for students. And then the town hall forum, where we're further getting into discussions about the goals of equity inclusion roadmap from 2 to 4. And then at Westfield, it will be at Westfield on October 29th, and then on Rockville campus on November 12th. So I hope to see you at one of these events. Dr. Jim Snezik and Mr. Ramon de la Cruz, could you come to the stage, please? Okay, so I have to tell you something about these two gentlemen. So in July, I said, we need to put this group together, figuring out who was going to co-chair, and we were in a meeting, and both of these gentlemen volunteered to co-chair, and they did a great job. I was nervous because, I'm still relatively new to the college. I've been here 2 years, and it was our first time doing this, right? So I said to Jim, oh my gosh, we only have 48 people. It's the week before the event.
And so we have 160 people here today. So thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ramon has been walking around every day working on PACE things in this equity dialogue, and I want to thank him for all of his time so much. And as a token of my appreciation, there you go. Yeah, you can open it. Come to the middle. They want to take.
Thank you, Montgomery College. Thank you to our students who are helping us out today, Jason Bruffy and all our staff running around making this whole production happen, MCTV, public safety, all the people who make things happen behind the scenes. Equity and inclusion, it makes me really happy to see everybody here. It makes me happy to see us here because we have to kind of set a foundation for ourselves as the choir, as the cheer squad. We kind of got to, start from the same place so we can go out and help teach and help bring other people into the fold and introduce them into this work of equity and inclusion. It's important. It's something that we have to welcome people with, and we have to invite them in with us. So that's my little takeaway for today. Let's invite others to join us in equity and inclusion, and when you feel excluded, include yourself.
You said it all.
All right. I wanted to give Jim a chance to speak, but we've all had a great day. Thank you for joining us, Montgomery College. Have a great day. I hope you feel recharged in your work for equity and inclusion. We'll see you out there.